Hello and welcome to this episode of the Unauthorized History of the Pacific War podcast. My name is Seth Paridon, historian and deputy director of the Mississippi Armed Forces Museum. With me, as always, is my co-host, author, historian, good buddy, and recent birthday boy, by the way. Happy birthday, John Parshall. How are you today?
I'm doing well. Glad to be here. I'm reminded of a story from my dissipated college youth. I came back senior year to college and was immediately dumped by my girlfriend. And my roommate was dumped by his girlfriend and two other close buddies. Likewise, within 3 days, all four of us just boom, 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 murderers row. And I
Mm.
went down to a bar that night, and I remember calling my parents and telling them, Mom, Dad, I'm down here at the Rube drinking for all the wrong reasons. And that's how I'm feeling today. Even though it's an off day, I gotta take one for the team here because we're doing Q&A. It's just gonna
We
go
are.
better. So
We
there you
are.
go. And with us, of course,
There
is
you
our
go.
beloved MC, Sean Bergstrom.
And I
Sean.
can't let John drink by himself, of course. Somebody's got to carry this damn Q&A.
Like where your head's at.
Again, as we discussed beforehand, Seth doesn't drink during the week, and today is Tuesday, so I'm
Yes,
having
it
a
is.
cup of old salt coffee in my USS Cod mug that was sent to me
Atta
by
babe.
the by
Old
Paul
salt.
at the Cod. So
Thank you,
anyway, all
old
right,
salt.
here
There's the
we
plug.
go.
There's the plug.
John, you are on, my dude. Take it.
All right, boys. As always, I always start the podcast with a little, housekeeping items. This will be the last Q&A we do this season. I believe
Yes.
this will be the sixth Q&A we've had, which breaks all kinds of land speed records for Q&As. Um,
Ridiculous.
so, without any further ado, gentlemen, New Year's Eve, here we go.
Mm.
Um, Good day, team. I like that start, strong start. Hope you're doing well. I write you from Armenia, Colombia. I think I pronounced that right. If I didn't, I'm sorry.
Cool. Yeah,
Cool. Very cool.
love
That
it.
that's in the region where coffee is produced, which Seth is drinking. And after missing the previous Q&A and losing my chance to ask Bill something on the Indianapolis, I finally decided to submit my questions, and they are both battleship related. All right, here we go, gents. In Neptune's Inferno, it is mentioned that after Savo Island, King suggested sending the standard type battleships to Guadalcanal, but Nimitz ignored him. So, what happens if King forces the issue and more battleships are sent forward in August? Would the Americans have been more aggressive? Would they have obtained decisive results sooner, perhaps? Or would this have resulted in Sassafaranga on steroids, with these battle wagons being torpedoed? Or maybe nothing due to fuel restraints and the dangers around Guadalcanal, and so Colorado becomes a tropical version of the Tirpitz, just sitting there riding an anchor. This is from our boy Santiago.
Those are great questions.
Those
Oh,
are, and you go, John. But there, you kind of
no,
you
no,
kind of
so
answered your own questions in your questions.
yeah.
So first thing, Nimitz never ignored Ernie King. Let's be 100% clear right there. That never occurred, my good man. I think Nimitz was like, Ernie, that may not be the best thing. And it is, you're 100% right. And that King did, I don't want to say push, John, but he
He
got
suggested,
the
yeah. He
issue of
definitely
sending this. Yeah.
he wasn't going to back down on that unless Nimitz gave him a well-considered answer, I guess would be the sort of response I would have. Fuel constraints really are important in at this juncture, and I would just point out for those of you who haven't seen it, over on Sal Mercogliano's "What's Going On with Shipping" channel, he did a deep dive into the logistics around Midway, the early war, and also the Guadalcanal campaigns. And he wants to do more on Guadalcanal, just talking about the importance of the oilers. At that point in time, even as late as, later in the year in 42, we're still running on a shoestring in terms of what we got in the theater to keep oil in the bunkers of our warships. And the last thing in the world that Chester wants is a bunch of old battle wagons out there because they were fuel hogs. That said, I
And
mean,
slow.
and slow. Yeah, that's the other thing. Um, Boy, I could see a Tassaparanga on steroids happening.
Absolutely.
Type 93 torpedo, that thing is absolutely, that is precisely the target that torpedo was built to sink, was those old battleships. But what do you think, Seth?
I think that yes, I agree with everything you just said, and you're 100% right in that the fuel constraints of the time period is what really kept those battle wagons, excuse me, I'm sorry, on the west coast of the United States. There were, oh, geez, Louise, at any one time there were at least 2 to 3 battleships, old style standard battleships, tied up at the Embarcadero in San Francisco.
Okay.
They were called they were oh Lord, I can't think of what they were called right now. Just lost my they were called damn it, I forget it. I don't know. It'll come to me
Yeah,
later.
some funny quip with
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah,
There was
okay.
Market Street Commandos. That's what they were called. They were called
That's
Market Street
beautiful.
Commandos. Yeah, the
Okay.
sailors aboard those battleships because
All right.
all they would do is every few weeks or so they'd go off and patrol the West Coast.
Right.
And they did. They did. It
Yeah.
was Task Force One. That's
Yeah.
exactly what they did. But
Pie.
when they'd
Yeah.
come back, when they come back into port, they were always there. And the guys, especially the submariners who were coming in and out of Mare Island,
Yeah.
where they called them Market Street Commandos because these guys were up and down Market Street chasing skirt. But regardless of that,
Right.
if they go out to Guadalcanal, I 100% agree it's going to be a torpedo shooting gallery because, to your point,
Uh,
they're exactly the target that those long lances were built to kill. And then two, we know the vacillating that Halsey does just to send South Dakota and Washington into Iron Bottom Sound.
yeah.
I mean,
Which is
he
just hair-raisingly dangerous. We've
it
talked
is, and
about
those
that.
were with
Yeah.
two fast
Fast
battleships,
battleships. Yeah. Who can
specifically
knock down
one.
Yeah, they can knock down an easy 6 knots more than any of those old girls can.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And South Dakota's got some pretty stout underwater protection, but that's neither here nor there. They're not going to send those battle wagons down in there unless things are like really, really, really bad. And I mean, they
Yeah.
were really, really, really bad, but I don't think they were bad enough. Does that make any sense?
Maybe.
And then two, I mean, you don't see another battleship get down to the South Pacific. Oh, speaking of shirts, to my USS Indiana Tokyo Bay surrender shirt, you
Yeah,
don't
babe.
see another battle wagon get down there. I think until after North Carolina gets torpedoed, and then then South Dakota, and then Washington, Indiana is the next one that comes down there, and she doesn't
That's
get
right.
down there till like when, John, December 42 or January 43, something like that.
I think something like that. Yeah, I'm not.
Yeah.
Anyway,
So,
super interesting
yeah,
question. Hadn't thought about
very,
that before, but yeah, that's good question.
If
very cool.
fuel is no object, off the top of y'all's head, what ships could it make it down there? What are
Battleships?
Yeah, what availability? Like if we're like, hey, we're throwing in the whole kitchen sink, what are those ships that are available?
Pennsylvania's ready to go. Um, is it New Mexico, I think, is ready to go.
Mississippi,
Colorado's, I think Mississippi was on the Atlantic
East Coast. Oh,
coast, but I
really?
could be wrong. I'm not sure. I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah.
But New Mex, Idaho, Pincy for sure, and New Mexico for sure, because there's pictures of them
Yeah.
at the Embarcadero. Um,
So 4 or 5, probably something like that.
easy,
Yeah.
because then there's Maryland that gets like, a wisp of damage at Pearl,
Yeah.
but she's back out there. She's doing her thing.
Yeah.
In 42, there's another one. Colorado. We said Colorado. Yeah.
Tennessee
Colorado.
also
Tennessee.
fairly
Yep.
fairly
Tennessee as
lightly
well.
damaged.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I'll
The
dig out
really
the
old.
picture.
Yeah.
Good.
I was just gonna, the really old ones, Arkansas, Texas, and New York,
Yeah.
all three of those stay on the East Coast, and they're doing things like escorting troop convoys that are going over to the UK because there was still an active surface raider threat at that point in time. You had Charnorskan now Tirpitz roaming around, and so we escorted our troop convoys very, very heavily, and that's where those older 14-inch jobs were located. Anyway,
Mhm.
okay, we tanked on this question. So much for our but a great
No,
question. So
that was
interesting.
It's
good.
awesome.
Yeah,
That was
so
good.
yeah.
The old
Anytime you want to
girls,
talk about battle wagons, it's a good day in my
yeah,
book.
the old girls, they don't see action. The first time they see action is the Aleutian campaign. Is that right?
Yes. Offensive action. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
yeah.
And I
Okay.
forget which one it is that shoots it. I think it's Pennsylvania that
Yeah, I
that,
think it is.
that
That's
bombards the
right.
shore at
Yeah.
Attu. And there's another
Yep.
one too, but I don't remember which.
Well, that was Santiago. He just wanted to say that he enjoys the podcast. He's learned
Thank you.
about the Pacific War while having fun, and listening to you guys has become as indispensable to me as listening to old rock music. None of you have Paul McCartney's voice, but that's neither here nor there. To keep it
Just as
short,
well.
just know we'll continue listening along. Take care and have a good time. I find that funny because somebody just went to go see Paul McCartney a few weeks ago.
I certainly did. I've actually seen Sir Paul 3 times. The Beatles are my all-time favorite band. My wife and I took our kids to go see Paul, which is
Yeah.
pretty freaking cool, if I do
Yeah.
say so myself.
All right, dear Seth and John, while Admiral Lee deserved great acclaim for performances of the USS Washington and its crew in the Second Naval Battle of Guadalcanal, was this battleship also the beneficiary of great luck in dodging the torpedo attacks from Otago and Taka? Similarly, while I am also a great fan of the cool looks of the Taco class cruisers, weren't their combat records rather disappointing, notably missing the opportunity to torpedo the Washington? How many torpedo hits would they have needed to really damage or even sink the Washington? I'm glad this didn't happen. Please feel free to edit the above for brevity. Love the podcast. Sincerely, George in Falls Church.
Go for it.
Yeah, Takao. They were pretty modern, and so they weren't necessarily going to risk those ships unduly if they could get away with it. Although, they were down there in the Sound on multiple occasions. I mean, Chokai, of course, is the leader of Mikawa's group at Savo Island. And she and Maya both, just off the top of my head.
Suzuya, yeah.
Well, Suzuya is one of the Mogamis.
Okay. Let's see.
Yeah.
Look what I know. I don't know anything.
But anyway, yeah, that's Cruiser Division 7, not, Cruiser. Anyway. Yeah, I mean, you're right. That they came uncomfortably close, apparently, to hitting Washington. But yeah, it was not their lucky day. And I forget the number of torpedoes that they had in the water between those two cruisers and the destroyers that there was. It was a lot. It was like 60 some, I want to say. And yeah, they came up empty. Nailed the destroyers. The RNG god sometimes does not smile upon you, and I think that's just kind of how it worked that night. So.
They were uncomfortably close to the point where when Lee is pulling out, when he's going along towards the the western side, he's going along the northern coast of Guadalcanal, heading west, basically egressing out of the area because he's like, I'm done here. I've kicked this ass.
Well, he
They
faints
explode in his weight.
briefly. Yeah. And he faints towards the convoy again to kind of draw the Japanese after him and away from Sodak, which is trying to get the heck out of Dodge at that point. But then, yeah, he decides that discretion is the better part of valor and comes around. And you're right, he goes down the east coast of the Russell Islands again to keep as much distance between him and his wounded compatriots as possible. And yeah, there are some that detonated in her wake. Yikes!
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Very close.
Great
Hey,
ship.
Shawn, I feel there was another part to that question. Was there another part, or am I just spacing?
No, you guys pretty much hit it. He was just talking about, the big part he was saying about the Takayo class. Did it live up to its billing, or was it more of a disappointment, John?
No, I don't think that reflects poorly on the ship as a class per se. It's just I just think they got unlucky that night is kind of what it comes down to. So,
yeah. The unconditional surrender declaration announcement at the Casablanca conference in World War II was controversial. Yeah. It allowed no negotiation except unconditional surrender. Some historians contend that statement unnecessarily prolonged the war. The policy of unconditional surrender removed any possibility for diplomatic negotiations, leaving Japanese leaders without options to preserve certain national interests or seek guarantees for the emperor's status. As a result, some argue this hardened Japanese resolve and may have delayed the end of the conflict, as leadership was unwilling to accept terms that could threaten their country's future or identity. If the condition of allowing the emperor to remain on the throne subject to U.S. oversight was offered early in 1945, do you feel that Japan would have been more willing to negotiate for peace before the atomic bombs were dropped? Thank you, Ed from Michigan.
Great question. Answer no. And the proof of that pudding you can find in Rich Frank's Downfall. There's a series of interchanges between Foreign Minister Togo and his underling in Moscow, the ambassador there, a guy named Sato. And Sato is a very experienced, seasoned hand. He's been a foreign minister in previous administrations too. And there's this episode during July of 1945 where Togo is telling Sato, I want you to go to Molotov, the foreign minister, and I want you to lay the groundwork for us to send a prince out as our special envoy, and we're going to use the Soviets as, intermediaries to try to negotiate a peace with the Americans. And Sato is like, okay, cool. What's my term sheet? Because I can't just walk into Molotov's office with nothing. What are we willing to give to end this war? And Togo hems and haws because Togo can't give him an answer because the Big Six can't come to an answer at this point in time. And Sato goes back and says, dudes, get real. The best terms we are going to get for the end of this war are going to be unconditional surrender, possibly modified with the retention of the pure imperial house. He sends that to Togo. 2 days later, Togo sends a cable back saying those conditions will not be acceptable under any circumstances whatsoever. And we're reading all of this diplomatic traffic. In fact, we're reading it in some cases more quickly than the Japanese are able to decode it themselves. So that right there tells you that the Big Six, which was run by militarists, particularly Anami, the army minister, who was just as hardline as you can get, they weren't interested in negotiating. They didn't even think they had lost the war.
Pig-headed. No, I'm not going to add anything to that. I have nothing to add. I'm just saying they were pig-headed, is what it was.
Yeah. So I do think, though, that question is extremely important because the common mythos that I think is out there in just sort of the general public is very much along those lines that, oh, geez, we hadn't been such hard asses, we probably would have been able to get the Japanese to walk themselves down a lot sooner. I just don't see it.
Well, I mean, just look what happens the night before the whole coup. And I mean, that's a real thing. I mean, there were guys that the emperor was like, this is what we're going to do. This is it. And these guys try to, prolong it even after that, even after the so-called God emperor says, I'm done. So no, these guys were the same thing in Germany too, by the way. I mean, Germany, that's a whole nother conversation. I'm not going there, but
yeah, I mean, the difference between those two scenarios, of course, is that we had literally millions of boots on the ground in Germany.
And that's the only thing that us and the Soviets.
Right.
So, yeah.
Well, I've got a quick story, if that's okay. Story time with Shawn.
Story time with Shawn.
All right. So everybody knows unconditional surrender. So Roosevelt said when he was sitting there, the first thing that pops into his mind is General Grant at Fort Donelson, right? Okay. That's where there's a general there named Buckner who was actually not roommates, but he was at West Point when Grant was there and they fought together in the Mexican War. So the thought was, and actually before the war, he had loaned some money to Grant to get home, because if you know a little bit about Civil War history, Grant was kind of down on his luck before the war. So he actually gives him money to get home. So the thought process is while they're in the fort, like, hey, maybe we can get a good negotiation since, you guys know each other. And of course, Grant comes back with the unconditional surrender. Butler, crazy enough, he gets captured. He's traded off. He eventually has a magnificent career in the South. Fights in Perryville, Chickamauga, Mobile. He's all over the place. He's kind of the who's who. After the war, he ends up making lieutenant general. After the war, his wife dies. He becomes like a governor of Kentucky, but he ends up remarrying, and he has a son. And the son, he goes and gets an appointment for West Point from Roosevelt in 1905 because his dad was in politics.
Right.
The father, the lieutenant colonel, he becomes the oldest lieutenant colonel general to die in the Civil War. Why do I say all this?
Yes, why do you say all this?
I know why, but go ahead.
Because the oldest lieutenant general to die in the Second World War is
Simon Bolivar Buckner Jr.
Mm-hmm.
Is his son.
That's right. That's right.
Crazy. He's in charge of the Okinawa campaign. So that's his direct son. So I kind of nerded out. I told Seth the story after the Okinawa campaign. I
Yeah,
was like, dude, do you know the
And
connection?
I did not know. I did not know.
yeah,
So
I'm
didn't
not
know that either.
not a CW guy, but that's cool. That is
yeah,
Yeah,
cool.
cool story. All right, guys. At Midway, how did Hiryu get off the counterstrike against Yorktown so quickly? In Shattered Sword, I think it's called Shattered Sword, very unknown book. John writes that the counteroffensive started
yep,
launching 1054. If
yep.
we work backwards in time, that means the Hiryu strike
He's right.
started warming up the planes about a half an hour earlier, around 1024, which means they were being brought up from the hangar deck and spotted approximately 1014 or so.
Yep.
According to that timeline on pages 154 and 155, the last Hiryu cap launched about 1015 in response to spotting VT3. I
Yep.
can see where the strike force may have been brought up to the flight deck on the heels of the cap launching, but
Yep.
did Yamaguchi jumped the gun on spotting the strike force or cut some corners? It would appear that
Bingo.
Kiryu was in the midst of providing cap and spotted for strike simultaneous. Rodney B wants to know.
Rodney B, you're not the only one who wants to know. Johnny P wants to know too. No, and that's a very valid question. It's an interesting critique of the whole thing that Tony and I are rolling out there. And um, you summed it up. You answered your own question. Was he jumping the gun? Yeah, and there are indications from some of the Japanese sources that Yamaguchi was kind of jumping the gun. And B, we absolutely do believe that they were cutting some corners. That when the dive bomber attack goes down between 1022 to 1027, that obviously Yamaguchi is watching all this, and he understands he would be considering his own carrier under tremendous danger, as indeed they were attacked by VT3, and were actually I've seen at least one Japanese source that says that Hiryu was hit by a torpedo from VT3 that did not detonate. That hasn't made it into the Western literature either. So I think what's going on there is, yeah, Yamaguchi is like, get these planes off the deck right the hell now. 10-minute warm up, let's rock, get going. And that's how they get their planes off as quickly as they do. Because you're right, it's a very abbreviated time frame from 1054 to like roughly 1010 is when they're, or 1015 when they're bringing birds up. Yeah, they got their strike up in like 10-15 minutes. Yikes.
As he's got these airplanes on the flight deck, he is pooping his pants watching everything go on around him.
Yeah,
Oh
boy.
Lord, oh pucker
Yeah.
moment.
Yeah. And this points out a weakness in the overall scholarship on the battle. I have less of an idea about what was going on inside the hangar decks than I thought I did when we were writing Shattered Sword 20 years ago. It's really murky. And one of the things that I'm hoping that we'll get as a result of better machine translation is being able to look at some of the other Japanese sources that are out there that might give us some hints as to what the heck was actually going on during that point in the battle. But you'll remember during an earlier Q&A, somebody asked a question like, if you could be,
Mm.
just go back in time in one place, what would you want to see? And this is precisely why I want to be, just some dude hovering at 10,000 feet over Kido Butai and looking around, can I see the birds coming up on Hiryu? When did they start coming up? Here's my stopwatch. I would love to be able to do that because, yeah, we still don't have a good understanding of it. Great question.
Cool. Scott from Ohio, Scott says, hello, love the show. He wanted to know if you guys know what happened to the American flags that were on Guam, Wake, and the Philippines after they fell. Any idea where they went?
You're talking a lot of American flags on the Philippines alone. Most of those things were captured. I mean, hell, there's footage of those things, of the Japanese ripping the flag off at Mariveles,
Yeah.
and I mean, literally, like and they tear it off the damn pole, and throw it on the ground and everything else. But I mean, I would imagine some Japanese colonel probably took that home,
Yeah.
and God knows. There's the thing. I think it's in the Pacific where they're going after Alligator Creek, and they're going through some of the dead guys' stuff, and they find Old Glory in one of their packs, and one of them said, "Oh, these are the guys that took Wake." Well, they have no idea. First of all, number one, number
Right.
two, it ain't. But
Also true.
I mean, it's possible that some private could have gotten it, but highly unlikely. And that stuff's going to go home with an officer, and Christ knows where that is, and
Yeah, or just,
into the
into the
trash
regiment.
bin.
Yeah, into the
Yeah,
well, I was going to say, might be captured, taken back to a headquarters of a regiment or something like that, and
possibly,
this, right? Anyway,
possibly.
I have a short but complex question for you.
I love
Who
those.
won who won the Battle of Midway, Fletcher or Spruance? You can answer with the percentage, but not 50-50. Ha. I'm reading a book by an Argentine author called Fletcher's Days, and it's very critical of how history views Admiral Fletcher. As soon as I finish this email, I'm going to start reading Shattered Sword. That's a good idea, brother. I'm sure you'll find the answer. I'll find the answer there, but I'd like to hear your opinion beforehand. I love your podcast. It's the best source of information in the Pacific Theater on the internet. Keep it up. Best regards, Juan Pablo from Montevideo, Uruguay. I think there's a pocket battle.
Montevideo, there is a
Yeah,
Graf Spee.
Montevideo. Yeah.
I have my opinion, but I'd love to hear what you have to say, Johnny
No, I
B.
want to hear yours, man, because before I get
Spruance.
saucy and say 50-50.
Ray Spruance. Ray
Okay.
Spruance won the battle because, and I'll say this, yes, Fletcher was in overall command, but as we know, Fletcher, and I don't remember exactly what time, he basically says, "I will conform to your movements," to
Yeah.
Raymond Spruance. So in other words, he doesn't cede command to Spruance. That didn't happen, but he's essentially letting Ray run the show.
Well, that's after his own flagship has been knocked out, though. I mean, that's the issue there. He is busy trying to oversee the salvage of Yorktown. I feel that he was very gracious about it in that he could have
Sure,
just,
agreed.
piled into a cruiser. He was already on a cruiser, having abandoned Yorktown. He could have trundled on over to TF 16, raised his flag, and said, "My show now." Um, but I think he had a sense that Spruance had things in hand, and yeah, was willing to let him kind of run with the football.
I think a lot of that has to do with the two task forces too.
Yeah,
Task Force 16's operating for all intents and purposes alone. I don't want to say alone. They're operating separately, and 17's doing their own thing over here. And I
which is
think that, you know,
very much according to American doctrine.
mhm.
Um, I mean, if you want to be a seriously awful person, you could also, put the failure of the flight to nowhere at Spruance's pinnacle. I mean, how come he wasn't exercising proper oversight of Mitcher and telling him, yeah, Mitcher disobeyed his orders, obviously, but I don't know. Um, I would say too that it is Fletcher who very wisely decides to take Nimitz's suggestion on the night of June 2nd to, very seriously, that when Nimitz suggests that a position further to the west would be advantageous for his carrier forces, Fletcher, very promptly moves both those TFs over to where they're going to be on the morning of June 4th, which essentially creates the conditions for the battle that we end up seeing. I don't know. I guess you can give the nod to Spruance, but I do think it is absolutely correct, as our questioner says, that Fletcher has not been given his due in this battle. He was overshadowed by Spruance, intentionally so, because of Morrison's kind of, what do I want to say, damning with faint praise, if you will. And if you really want to get down in the weeds, the book you should read is Black Shoe Carrier Admiral by John Lundstrom, which is a biography of Fletcher, and does I think yeoman's work in resurrecting Fletcher's career and setting the record straight as to why he made the decisions he made, not only at Midway but in all three of the carrier battles that he fought.
And
So there you go.
even before
Yeah.
the relief of Wake Island,
Yep.
a lot of people for a lot of years had pinned Fletcher as being, I don't want to say a coward or anything like that, but he
Right.
was the one that decided to turn around and head back and not support Wake. And, quite the opposite. He was the one that was like, damn it, we're going to do this.
Yeah.
And it was, but that's, neither here nor there. Now, I still say Spruance because of the events that happened after that, though, but
Mm.
not after that. I'm talking about after the first attack. After the
Hmm.
first attack, I mean, that's everything's coming off of Enterprise after that. Everything.
Yeah,
I
everything.
mean, there
Yeah,
are obviously everything worth a damn. I mean, Hornet does send stuff out, but everything worth no offense to Hornet, but everything worth a
yeah,
damn comes off the Douglas
yeah,
fir of CV6, and that's
yeah,
under Ray. So
yeah. Fair enough.
Percentages?
60-40.
yeah, I'd say, I don't know.
You're 80-20.
65. No, I'm going to say 65-35. I'm going to go
Oh, okay. All
Ooh.
right then.
whatever.
All
It doesn't
right.
matter. It doesn't really
Mhm.
matter. And I think another part of the reason that Fletcher gets sidelined is because of what Ray does after, you
Mm,
know, Task Force 58. Not Task Force 50. Well, yeah, but I mean, Fifth Fleet and everything else. And Ray, rises to this stratospheric level
yeah,
of command. And Fletcher,
yeah. I
thanks,
oh,
Ernie.
yeah, thanks, Ernie. This is one of the other points that Sal makes in this video that he just did last week. He talks about the fact that Fletcher by far has the most experience in running carrier task forces by the time you get to Eastern Solomons, and this dude really understands how badly hampered we are by their fuel constraints. Sal has this beautiful graph showing the state of the bunker fuel on board the carriers, the cruisers, and the destroyers. And you can just see that it's always the destroyers that are,
Sure.
running out of fuel. And they got plus up, and um, so people look at Fletcher as being overly cautious, but it really was driven by the fact that if you lose one oiler in these battles, it's over. You got no fuel within 1,000 miles, and so you have to be very, very careful and make sure that your carriers and larger combatants in particular are plussed up before you get into a battle. One of the points he makes at the end of Midway, King gets irate that we weren't being a little more aggressive in following up the Japanese after that battle. Dude, we've been maneuvering for a solid week at this point, and some of the destroyers are down to 20% fuel. It's not viable. We're not going anywhere after these guys. So, anyway, there you go. Logistics. Next,
Armchair generals talk tactics. Real generals talk logistics.
hells to the yeah.
Hi, Seth and John. Dave here from Lake Macquarie, Australia. A 1.5 hour drive north of Sydney. Yours is the best World War II history podcast in the English speaking world. No,
Thank
Dave,
you.
on the planet. On the planet, Dave. John often says that the IGN were a day late and a dollar short in not committing to defeat Henderson Field.
Yeah.
Their most damaging sortie was the dual Congo bombardment, but they didn't risk more battle wagons, possibly partly due to the tight confines of Iron Bottom Sound. Their 16 and 18.1-inch battleships had just enough range to more safely bombard Henderson Field from close to an inhabited southern shore of Guadalcanal. I realize accuracy at extreme range isn't great, but they should have been able to hit a stationary target that size with a few brave spotters and didn't retreat from the bombardment. Is my theory plausible? I'm more than happy to be told that you're smoking it, bro. Love the show, Dave.
You, Dave. You're smoking it, bro. Range really wasn't the issue there. Even during the first bombardment, the Japanese had spotters up on Mount Austin that were actively, directing the gunfire there. So just because there are a couple of, Marine defense batteries on the North Shore, around Lunga taking pot shots at those at some of those battleships, they were completely ineffective. So being able to sit 4 miles further north in Iron Bottom, that's not really the constraint. It really comes down to, do you have the right kind of ammunition and do you have the fuel to get there and back? That's where I'm at.
No, 100%. I mean, you and I've talked about this. It's been a while, but we talked about this a while. Is it why didn't Haruna and Congo come in with Karishima
Yeah.
because they didn't have the ammunition or the enough, and then the fuel. And I mean, hell, even Ugaki even mentions both of those things in his diary. Is that I don't remember exactly the word for word that
He
he
mentions
says.
the fuel. I don't think he talks about the ammo
You're right. He
because
doesn't say the ammo, but he does do the fuel. Yeah.
yeah, that was a recent thing we just kind of uncovered in the Senshi Social volume on Guadalcanal, is that Congo and Haruna had cross-decked their Type 3 ammo to Hiei and Kirishima. And so they didn't have any. And so they were like, oh, they're going to be useless. And so they left them north of the islands, which was dumb. Honestly, I don't even know whether Mutsu and Nagato carried Type 3 shells. I mean, they certainly must have had them, but you got your guess is as good as mine as whether they had them in theater or not. So
I don't think Yamato I don't think Yamato
Yamato
had him
did
at that time. At that
at
time?
that time. That's the question. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think the overall question actually points to the need for better research on the Japanese side as to, when was the Type 3 shell introduced into each of those three classes of battle wagons? The Congos clearly had them, but what about, the 16 and 18.1-inch ships? I couldn't
If
tell you.
if I remember correctly, Musashi was popping those at Shibuya Sea. I
Okay.
think. I
I
think
think,
so. I
no,
think that's what we were
absolutely
talking
she
about.
was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then of course we know Yamato was doing on her death ride, but
Yeah. But that was
but
2 years later. And,
uh,
I don't know that they had them in mid to late 42. Great question.
Great question. Good morning, and thank you for all the information and entertainment you provide. Question: if John's favorite admiral, R.K. Turner, had burned too many bridges or had fallen overboard, were there any others who could have replaced him as successfully, or was he the only choice? My wife loves your podcast as well. She finds it interesting and feels as if we are taking part in a conversation. We enjoy our weekend morning coffees while watching. Cheers, Mike
Oh,
H.
thank you, Mike.
there's several guys who could have taken his place, but
Well, yeah, I mean, I would have reached my long arm over to the Mediterranean and, plucked Kent Hewitt and said, my boy, welcome to the Pacific. I mean, because that guy was really, really good. He ran all the amphibious operations of the Med. So that's one dude. How about,
Connolly's another one.
yeah,
Connolly's another one.
Connolly.
Yeah. And there was another guy,
What about
geez, he was
Kincaid?
Thomas Kincaid?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
No.
I don't have a really high opinion of
Well,
Thomas
who's
Kincaid.
who's the guy that does all the amphibious ops for Mac though? Isn't that see?
Remember? I don't remember. I don't know. Kincaid was Seventh Fleet Commander, so he's gonna be a fleet commander. He's not doing the amphib ops. I can't think of it right now. I'd have to go
Yeah.
look at my friggin' notes. But I don't have any notes for this because we didn't prep.
Yeah.
I don't know.
No, we
But
never
no,
do.
Connolly would certainly be a guy that could have taken his place. Um, hell, I mean, you could even postulate that Roy Geiger could have done it if he had to, because of the inner workings that he had and the knowledge that he had of the systems.
Yeah, no, that's a good point actually. I mean, he's obviously very successful in the Marianas operations. Um,
I I was going to
Go
say
ahead.
I hold to the fact that Turner, I mean, he was successful. There's no lying. I mean, there's no debating that. He was successful with the Alligator Navy
Yeah.
as it was called. There's no question. But, he was a burr in the saddle for Chester Nimitz and Raymond Spruance. And I still say that the reason that he hung around as long as he did is because he and Ray were pals.
Hmm.
And Ray Spruance propped him up a lot, like
Yeah.
a lot. And I think had it been somebody else, uh, I don't think Turner
Well,
would
he
have
was
survived
also
as long as
friends
he
with
did.
with Ernie King, and that didn't hurt either. I mean, he had been King's planning officer. Some of the sort of the blueprint for an early counterattack across the Pacific are using Noumea as a springboard. That's a plan that Turner had come up with for King, and King kind of had in his back pocket. That's a point that Trent Hone has made in some of his articles. So yeah, he had friends in high places. He was a tremendously gifted bureaucratic infighter, and yeah, so there you
He
go.
was
But
he was a brilliant dude. He was like
yeah,
super, super smart. He was just a
just a
wanker.
grating, annoying.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the larger point, and we made this before as well, is that
And he was a drunk.
he was a drunk. If if you've truly got a situation where you have a military where there's one guy in charge of an operational billet like that is truly indispensable, there's something wrong with your military. And yeah, I've said it before that I'm absolutely certain that in the back of his mind, Nimitz probably had four guys in his Rolodex that is like, yeah, okay, I can pluck that dude out. I don't know who those guys are now, but I do know that Nimitz is the former kind of head of the Bureau of Personnel, even though it was called BUNAV back in the day. He would have had in his mind, yeah, that cat or that cat or that cat, I could plug them in. So,
That was a guy I was thinking of. I just did some real-time history. William Blandy,
oh yeah,
Blandy. William Blandy, 5th
yeah,
Amphibious Corps. That
thank
was the name
you.
I was just went
Yeah, yeah,
poof. Yeah,
right.
William Blandy,
Okay, there you go.
Great job,
who
guys.
did
That was some
RKT's job at 45. But anyway, go ahead.
good
Mhm.
job. Love your smooth jazz there. You guys were perfect on that. What would have been the impact for the U.S. in the Pacific theater had Somerville managed to sink or damage one or more of Naguma's carriers during the IJN's raid into the Indian Ocean in April 42? Kind regards, Ross J., Worcester, UK.
Great question. My guess is that if he sinks one or two carriers, that in turn is going to scotch. Okay, so let me back up. Understand that the raid into the Indian Ocean occurs at exactly the same time that Yamamoto is waging the bureaucratic battle with Naval GHQ in Tokyo to get his way for his Midway battle plan.
Mhm.
And that is already basically in the bag for him by like April 5th. And so my guess would be that if Somerville ends up scratching or sinking one or two of those carriers, Yamamoto would have gone back to GHQ and said, sorry, can't do the Coral Sea operation at this point in time. I don't have the carriers to make that happen. And therefore, I'm going to take whatever carriers I've got left from that ding, four or five of my flight decks, I'm going to put them all into Midway. And I think the result of that would have been roughly the same kind of battle that you see taking place historically, a contest between three American carriers and four or five Japanese carriers. That's I don't know, but that's my guess.
So no Coral Sea.
No Coral Sea. That's right.
That becomes Coral Sea.
Yeah. And okay, thank you for reminding me of that because then that makes that more of a stand-up contest because we don't lose Lexington. And so now we've got a fight where it's potentially 4-on-4 and I think we win that, or 4-on-5, we win that all day long. Just because of the disparity of scouting assets, that we have so many more scouts on our side in the form of PBYs that are in Midway, that gives us the edge on who's going to get their first strike in effectively. That's going to be us. Odds are.
All
So
right. Good.
I feel like I'm just blathering, man.
No,
Seth,
that was great.
anything from you? Okay, cool, man.
You know, no,
That was
I
awesome.
would have loved to have seen Lexington survive longer than she did because
Mm-hmm.
beautiful ship. But
Mm-hmm.
her air group was pretty badass too. I mean,
Yeah, they were. They
they
were
were
good.
stout. They were
Yeah.
really stout, all of them.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Cool. I know we've kind of talked about this, but I wanted to nail this down. Ben in Peoria, Illinois wants to know on December 7th, why were the carriers not in Pearl Harbor during the attack? Thanks for the excellent program. I know there was three in the Pacific, right, Seth? And one was on the West Coast, and there was two at sea. Is that correct?
correct. Lexington and the
Enterprise.
Big E were at sea, and Sarah was on the West Coast.
And wasn't one of the
San
carriers coming back from
Francisco,
dropping off
San Diego.
Wake Forest, Jesus, Wake Island? Wake Forest, Wake Island, same thing.
Same thing.
Love it.
Yeah. So Enterprise actually should have been in port that morning. There were two things, actually three, two things that kept her out. One of which is that she ran into some bad weather and she was fueling her DDs. Another is I think it was either Pensacola or
Yeah,
Northampton.
they got like a cable wrapped around a screw or something like that,
Yes,
right?
yeah, and I don't remember which one it was. It was one of those two heavy cruisers, but yeah, it's a freak thing,
Yeah.
and they wound up having to essentially, not stop, but do some patchwork repairs,
Yeah.
and that
Did they
delayed her
send
further.
divers down and that
They
kind of
did,
stuff.
if I remember correctly. Yeah, they did. So I mean, this is
The
not.
middle of the Pacific. Yeah.
Yeah, this is not a,
Right.
a small thing. And then two, as I said, they ran into bad weather. They had the fuel, they had the cable around the screw thing, and then they ran into some pretty nasty weather that slowed everybody down. So she should have been in port
Yes.
on the morning of the 7th of December. And hell, she gets there the following day. She
Yes, she
pulls up.
does.
She
Yeah.
and she was off the coast. She could have made it in on the 7th, but Halsey's like, hell no, I'm not going in there. Not until the following day, So,
Hmm.
but yeah, she should have been in port, and it was just a couple of freak things that kept her out.
Yeah. And
And as we
Lexington is,
know, her air group did go in, or at least the dive bombers did, and the fighters later.
and some of them got shot down for their
Mhm.
trouble, unfortunately.
All right, we're gonna go nerderati here for a second.
Oh
So
boy.
so lock in, boys.
Mhm.
Hey, Seth and John, my name is Ken Bates, and as of the past couple of years, I've discovered the greatness that is the Unauthorized History of the Pacific War podcast. Since then, I've been an avid listener and love the archival footage episodes.
Sweet.
We love hearing that.
I noticed something in episode 520, and I haven't listened to 521 yet, so you may have addressed it then. When you were
I don't even know
showing the
what that is.
footage from the ceremony for the USS Trout,
Yes.
Yeah.
I think John stated that it was Vice Admiral Bob English because of the
Yeah.
3-star flag on the mast. The flag was a red flag. I thought flags for vice admirals were blue. Would this mean it's a U.S. Army Lieutenant General instead of a vice admiral? Full disclosure, I'm very much an amateur historian, so I could be completely wrong, and I've always appreciated the learning moments. Again, thank you for taking the time out of your busy weeks to make this podcast happen. It's my favorite podcast, and I listen to it eagerly and wait every episode on Tuesday. Thanks again, Ken.
Thank you, Ken. And you get the gold star because you absolutely sleuthed it out all on your lonesome. Yeah, we screwed up.
Yep.
And who did it end up being, Seth? I can't remember.
Delos Emmons.
Oh, right.
General Emmons. Yeah, it
Yeah.
was Delos Emmons because, all right, so full disclosure, when it comes to those archival footage episodes, with the exception of like the few where I'm like, this tail number is this guy and this tail number is this guy, we do no prep on those either, which is why we like doing them because they're
We're
easy
lazy.
to do. We're lazy. Yeah. But yeah, no, we foobarred that up, and it didn't even occur to me that they're awarding, and there's freaking footage of this. They're awarding Silver Stars and DSCs, Distinguished Service Crosses, which are, well, the Silver Star isn't, but the DSC is an Army award. So we should have known right then and there. And you were 100% right, and certainly I should know because it was a red flag. And whenever there's a general at Camp Shelby, that damn red flag flies in front of my museum or the White House or headquarters or wherever that general may be, and it's 1, 2, or 3 stars. So you'd think I would know, but yeah,
There you go. So
sometimes you
yeah,
swing and miss.
you do. Gold star for you.
Yep,
Good
absolutely.
job.
Yeah, good job. That's
Good
great.
job.
That's cool.
If you want to correct me, don't write in.
John was wrong.
I've seen John pop up in a few places on YouTube discussing alternate history and what ifs. This is Seth's favorite part of history, everybody.
Oh boy.
What if the Japanese invasion of Wake Island was delayed a few days? Would the resupply mission have been enough to push them off? This is from our boy Nick.
We've already talked about that, but yeah, go.
No, you go.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
No doubt in my mind, because of the fact that, to be perfectly honest with you, even without those resupply and relief effort is actually the more proper term. The Marines won. They
Right.
did. They won.
Yeah, they won. Right.
They
Yeah.
won.
How
They
many?
did.
I can't remember off the top of my head. How many more combat troops are they bringing out?
Who? Us or them?
Us.
Oh, it's another defense battalion.
It's
So like
400 or something like that.
yeah, 4-ish, something, 4 and some change, and ammo out the wazoo, which is why we said that they were never going to pull the Marines off of there. They send
Right.
it. We spit out the numbers of how many 50 cal and 30 cal grenades.
It was
It's
several million
asinine.
rounds
Yeah,
of 30
yeah.
cal. Yeah, it was crazy.
Quite evident they're not going anywhere.
Yeah, which, although I think that potentially sets up an even bigger defeat later on down the
I would
line.
agree with that. Yeah.
I don't think we're going to be able to hold on to that place long term just because they dominate the air and sea space around that island. And there's that situation is not going to change until like 1944. So yeah, I think we win in the short term, but I don't think we win in the long term. Although I will say that the ability to pull off a lot of the civilians would have been a good thing that would have come out of that as well. But
Indeed.
anyway,
And,
yeah,
and regarding that episode in particular, we got a lot of comments like, "Tell us what happened to the civilian. Tell us what happened to the people that were captured." I thought it was, and I apologize, but I thought it was relatively self-evident what happened to those guys. They were prisoners of war. They were
right.
taken to Japan and in some cases China and all over creation to work in coal mines and slave labor. A lot of those guys were died.
But
Some of
some
them
of
were
them were killed
executed.
on wake. I mean, they were
A
there
lot of the
for
civilians were, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
98
something like that.
civilians were executed by the Japanese on Wake Island, and the Japanese officer that did that was obviously punished for that after the war.
Right.
But yeah, a lot of the civilians, not all of them, but a lot of them stayed on Wake for a while, and as I said, 98 of them were killed,
And one
executed.
survived. One
They did.
survived briefly
Hmm.
to scribble on a
On a
rock,
rock, exactly.
98 killed date X, whatever it was. And then he later was captured by the Japanese and beheaded. So yeah, that dude, the Japanese commander, we hung him, didn't we?
Yeah, I think so.
Uh,
Yeah.
and rightly.
Yeah,
So
good on him too. For good
yeah.
on him for hanging him. I mean,
Anyway, great question.
Great question. Leo from Paoli, Pennsylvania says, "Hi, Seth and John. Your series on Pearl Harbor was the best I've ever seen
Oh, thank
or
you.
heard,
thank you.
but it wasn't as good as your atom bomb series." Okay,
Mm,
Leo. I heard Admiral Makawa left the Battle of Savo Island without attacking the transports because of a combination of his maps were destroyed by battle damage and he had heard IJN Makomo's fate. Is it possible he was also out of ammunition? Was it common for AJN ships to not have fully stocked ammunition bunkers? Was ammunition production a problem in the IJN?
Nope. No, ammo wasn't the issue. I think there are a couple of things going on there.
Land-based air fear.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're absolutely right that Macau was very much aware of what had happened to Mikuma and Mogami the previous month at Wake or at Midway.
Midway.
Dive bombers kill cruisers. That's what happened. So he knows too, as far as he knows, Fletcher's carriers are still in the neighborhood as well, and those carriers are brimming with dive bombers. The other big underlying factor I'm convinced is a doctrinal one, which is that the Japanese Navy is ultra Mahanian in their outlook, in that they view sea control as devolving from winning naval battles, and that if all you have to do is decisively beat the enemy force, sea control is going to kind of fall into your hands automatically, which means that having won this battle, we don't have to worry about the logistics. The Americans are going to pull out. The Japanese army will be able to come down and do their thing. This should all just sort of magically occur, and they really were a navy that overlooked the importance of logistics, I would argue. And so, yeah, they had this golden opportunity in front of them. They might have suffered some fairly serious losses in the course of reaching out and taking that. But I think you can make an argument that it would have been worth the loss potentially of every ship in Makawa's squadron to have destroyed those transport anchorages that night, because that would have cut the logistical basis of this campaign off at the knees. It might have ended it right then and there. And if you look at, eventually they're going to lose 24 major warships, including a couple of carriers and a couple of battleships, in the course of losing this 6-month campaign. If I could sacrifice, a dozen warships right here and now and win it, why wouldn't you take that? So, what do you think, Seth?
Yeah, you also got to, and I
I mean,
know you know this,
hindsight is 2020.
for sure. But you're also thinking, what the Japanese thought the Guadalcanal campaign, the landing was a raid. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't the start of the Pacific counteroffensive. They
Also true. Great point.
never believed that that was what
Yeah.
it actually was.
Right.
They say this. They said this multiple. The Japanese said this multiple times that they felt that it was a raid, kind of like, of course, it hadn't
Hmm.
happened yet, but what Macon Island raid. Macon Island, occurs a couple weeks
Right.
later, but that's what they thought it was
Yeah.
until they realized it ain't. But I mean, why would you sacrifice valuable ships to shoot up
Yeah.
transports if that may or may not be there for a small scale
Yeah.
raid?
Although
So, and that's what I'm just saying. That's what they're looking at that time, I believe.
yeah. Although a number of Makawa's own staff officers are like, dude, this is what we came down to do, was to shoot up the transports. Let's go get them. So opinion was certainly divided in Makawa's staff as to what their course of action should be. But
When
yeah, you got this kind of confluence of factors here, and they pull out.
when does he clear the area? And I'm not talking about like, right there offshore. I'm talking like Iron Bottom Sound. When does he clear that area? I- my
It's
point in
much.
this is that he was deathly afraid of American air power, and he
Yeah.
wanted to get the F
Out
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 now.
of Dodge. Yeah.
And
No,
and that's what I'm saying. I don't remember exactly what time he clears the
I,
area, but it's
I can
not
find.
much early. It's not too much before dawn is
Yeah,
what I'm
it's
trying
like
to get
oh
at.
three thirty or
Yeah.
400 or something like that. Because
It
and that was one of the things that
there's
he
not a
is
lot of
very
darkness left, in other words, is what I'm trying to
bingo.
say.
Yeah, for sure. And again, as soon as dawn comes up, he's sure that Fletcher's carriers are going to be
Yeah.
sending out dive bombers to greet him. Um,
And he had
and
every right to believe that too.
absolutely, he did. So,
And
all right,
anyway, that's my gist of it is this
real time
more
history.
than
Let's go on to
anything
the
else,
next
he was
question.
afraid of air power and he wanted to get the hell out of there before he got
How
attacked.
much was on Guadalcanal, Seth, at that time? How much?
Nothing.
There was no land base. It was just
Nothing.
carrier at that time.
Yeah,
Okay.
nothing. The first aircraft don't come back, don't land on the canal until like the 19th or 20th of August.
Yeah,
So, well, the first
here
offensive.
here we go. Um, it when Makawa is making this set of decisions, it's 0216, and his force is scattered at this point. He knows it's going to take, an hour and a half to kind of gather his ships back up and then make his way back into the Sound, because at this point he's kind of north of Savo, right? And so he deliberates on this until 0340 is when he orders the high speed retreat back up the slot. So yeah, there is not a heck of a lot
There's
of
not a
of
lot of
night.
darkness left.
Yeah. So that's what's
Mm-mm.
going on there.
He's trying to get the hell out of Dodge.
Yeah, he is. Anyway, great question.
Great answer, guys. Jasper W. from Mississippi. Jasper, I hear there's a good
I know
museum
who
in
Jasper
Mississippi.
W is.
All right. Well, you're going to love this question. How much of Admiral Halsey's early successes were due to the presence of Captain Miles Browning, and Halsey's later less than successes due to Browning's absence? And how important is an officer's personality, temperament, and morality to his performance? Thanks, guys.
Do it, Seth.
I
Do
would
it.
argue that Bill Halsey was successful in spite of Miles Browning, because Miles Browning was a complete and utter jackass. And I mean, I could go. So you could make the argument, and I know you know this, that some of the reasons for Enterprise, or not just Enterprise, but Task Force 16's loitering about, that's all Miles Browning being a tool at Midway and trying to force his way into Ray Spruance, because Ray inherited Bill Halsey's staff, whom chief of staff was one Miles Browning. So you
Mhm.
could lay some of that blame at the feet of Miles Browning. No, I think Halsey's successful in spite of Miles Browning, not because of Miles Browning. And insofar as Bill Halsey's later escapades, if you will, his chief of staff at that point was a guy named Mick Carney. I don't remember his first name, but it ain't Mick. That was his nickname. Um, and Carney was a yes man, whereas
Mhm.
Browning was not. Browning would and often did tell Bill Halsey, this isn't a good idea, but he didn't do it that nicely.
Right.
And Carney was a yes man. And I know that that's
That
why
gets
you
him in trouble.
see Halsey get into trouble in 44.
Yeah.
Is because Carney's like, oh, okay, boss, and he doesn't sit there and tell him what a good chief of staff is supposed to do and say,
Right.
okay, but maybe we should look at this. And so that's
Yeah.
my opinion, and I'm sticking to it.
There
Miles
you go.
Browning was
There you
worthless. He
go.
really was. He was a worthless human being.
All right.
Brilliant guy, but a worthless human being.
All right.
Everybody who knew the dude hated him. Like everybody who knew him hated him with a
Yeah.
passion.
All right. Greetings. I love your YouTube channel. Welcome, full-time John. When and how was it decided that the USS Arizona and Utah survivors assigned to those ships on December 7th can have their remains interned in their respective ships? I worked as a park ranger there from '04 to 10 and was a member of the dive teams who had the honor of carrying out the survivors' request. And know the first one of the Park Service performed was of Chief Teslo, who was also returned to his brother, who was never recovered from the Arizona in 1982. But did the Navy grant this request prior to the NPS taking over the management of the Arizona Memorial? Oh, John, thanks to you eavesdropping on the 65th Symposium Tour Talk at Hickam. I'll never forget the Japanese use 7.7 millimeter, not 7.5 millimeter rounds. Sincerely, Joey One Kenobi.
Joey Wan Kenobi.
Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Yeah, Joey's a friend of mine on Facebook. Um, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. I was privileged to see one of those interments. Actually, just happened to be out there at the time that the diver was going down. That was a somber moment. But I do not know the backstory there. I'm trying to think. My friend Ryan out in the Philippines, who runs the cemetery out there, he would probably know the history of that better than me. Yeah, I'm Johnny Clueless. I'm sorry, man. Couldn't tell you.
Yeah, I know two people who would give you that answer, but I can't get a hold of either of them right now. Daniel Martinez and Amanda Corona. They both work there at the
The
Arizona.
memorial.
And yeah, and I don't know. I personally, well, I don't want to say anything. I don't know. I don't think the Navy did that until NPS took it over, but I could be wrong.
So I don't think we're going to have a good answer on this one, but I wanted us to reminisce. So bear with this question for me. As one of your under 25 listeners, I was introduced to World War
Thank
II
you.
history through video games and simulators and the old
Fair.
History Channel animated series like Battle 360 series John and was in. And there any video games or military simulations y'all have consulted or any games you played and enjoyed? Thank you all for amazing episode. Much love from Pete from Alabama.
Man,
Okay.
that's a cool question.
That is a cool
Also,
question.
Battle 360, man, I never even saw those episodes because I don't know. I don't watch myself on that kind of stuff. I play Hearts of Iron 4. You know, I'm a nerd for strategy computer games, particularly the Paradox titles. I play Stellaris and Crusader Kings 3 and Hearts of Iron 4. I like all of those. But I've kind of stopped playing computer games. They take too much time. I'm trying to write a stupid
Yeah,
book.
yeah,
So, what about
agreed.
you,
So
Seth?
well, back in my late teens, early 20s, I did play some computer games, war games and stuff like that. And, Call of Duty, Medal of Honor, all that jazz. And then I played World of Warships when it came out.
I did too.
Yeah, until
Yeah.
it got stupid. Like it got like farcical.
Grindy as hell. Yeah,
Yeah,
just
yeah, yeah. I played
oh,
World of
you want to
Warships.
yeah, you want a Yamato class battleship? That's like 20,000 hours of your life, or whatever.
Exactly.
It's just
And
like,
of course,
come
naturally, I
on.
did the U.S. battleships, and I had them all. I had the Montana and the whole shebang, and I liked
Hey,
it.
okay,
And then
you
it
went
just,
deeper than I did. I only got up to
yeah,
like a Cleveland class light cruiser. I'm like, I'm out. This is dumb.
I, I,
I just
I
can't.
played it for so long, and I have to say, I was pretty damn good at it, and I got a lot of. I had them all. Like I had all the U.S. cruisers, I had all the U.S. battleships, the whole thing, and it was fun. And
Yeah,
then they started introducing all these wild, dumb things
crazy.
and
Yeah,
submarines, and I was like, I'm out. Um, Insofar as what game, I don't, and that's it. And that was 4 years ago. That was the last time I touched any computer to play any game. That being said, I have a 16-year-old son who plays the ever-loving hell out of war simulated computer games, Call of Duty, and he plays World of Warships on his console on PS5. But the one to answer that question is actually Sullivan, not me, because he can tell you everything you wanted to know. Because that
Yeah.
dude is constant. Him and his buddies, they get on there and they talk to each other and they're playing, together, and it's actually kind of cool to watch because they're sitting there yakking at each other and calling each other names and everything else. It's awesome. It's like Sean and I do every Sunday. We
Yeah,
sit there
pretty
and call each
much.
other names and poke fun at one another. It's
I
what they do.
used to War in the Pacific too. I used to play that.
Yep.
And
Yep.
the Admiral's edition is still, I was just looking that up in real time too. So yeah, that's kind of good stuff.
Um,
Silent Hunter was a submarine game, and there was a one about the Pacific, and I can't think of what the name of it
Can't
was.
either.
But you could command a Gato or a Baleo class submarine, and sometimes you could command like in a historic scenario or whatever. I can't see what that is.
Silent Service that was on Nintendo. Do you remember that one?
Oh,
I
right.
do,
Yeah,
yeah,
I did do
yeah,
that.
Dude, I used to
yeah.
play the crap out of that game.
That's going back.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Well,
that's like 80s, 90s, right?
yeah, no, I played the original Harpoon too. That was
Yeah.
just anyway, that's way back there.
Also, I played Panzer General and
Silent
Panzer
Hunter 4,
General
Wolves of the
2.
Pacific. That was his called. Panzer Gen Armor, that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Panzer General 2. Spent hours doing that.
Oh, I forgot. Yeah.
Seth
Good.
and I used to play Axis and Allies board game all the
Yeah.
time as kids.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
And then World of Tanks is pretty phenomenal. That was as a former tank
Same
commander.
same company as World of Warships. Yeah.
Yeah,
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 my company used to work with their company actually to do multiplayer backends and that kind of stuff and make it run on Linux. That's basically what we did.
yeah. But I mean,
Good
to
question.
yeah, great
Yeah.
question. But I figured we go down memory row.
Yeah.
An odd little storyline here. When I worked at World War II Museum, um, I owned an NFA weapon, a Class 3 automatic weapon at one point in my life, and I knew how to knew all the process to get automatic weapons, Class 3 weapons through the ATF, and it's a marathon if anybody's ever done it. And if you haven't, you better pack your patience. But regardless of this, when the World War II Museum wanted to buy some live firing automatic weapons, I was the one that went and did the deed for them.
Okay.
That being said, there was a video game called damn, it's about squad combat in Normandy,
Mm.
and it's like I can't think of the name of it. But regardless of this, they wanted to shoot some actual footage and audio of an MG-42. And I was
Oh,
like, well, I happen to know where I can get one of them. And they went through the World War II Museum. This wasn't like some shady,
shady. Yeah.
no, it was a legitimate thing. And so in one of these games, I'll look it up in a minute. The German MG-42 gunner and Waffen SS camouflage of all goddamn things. It's me.
That's funny.
Swear to God. Swear
And
to
what
God,
does
because I
this
just sat there and ripped the 42 for like, I don't know, 4 or 5,000 rounds while they filmed it from
it
every angle
sounds
that they could think
basically
of.
like it's just
It's I've shot a lot of guns in my life
yeah.
and a lot of World War II firearms, damn near every one there is, and the MG-42 still to this day is just it's mind-blowingly impressive to pull the trigger on that monster. It's
Yeah.
incredible.
Yeah.
All right, let's get
All right.
back on
That-
on track, gents. Keith from Pennsylvania wants to know, hey guys, love the show. My question is, was the Keto Batai actually spotted by a Soviet merchant ship? And did it
No.
send a message or anything? Is that a rumor?
Great question. And back story to this. There have been consistent rumors that Kitabutai on its transit to Pearl Harbor did things like was not observing radio silence and or was overheard by a liner called the Lur Line and or was sighted by some Soviet merchant ships. Understand too that there were lend leases in place at this point, and so there were Soviet ships that were coming over to the West Coast, were loading up with cargo, and then were going back to the Kamchatka Peninsula and offloading there. But if you there's an article, God, I can't remember the author's name, that did a really deep dive on where were all of the Soviet merchant ships, during that time period, during November 25th to December 7th, where were those ships located? The thing is that most of those ships are going to be they're going to be on a Great Circle route back to Vladivostok. And if you look at how that route is going to carry them, it's just like if you got on an airplane on Seattle and you fly to Tokyo, where do you end up going? You go up right over the Aleutians and that kind of thing, which would have taken those ships well to the north of where Kutabutai was transiting. The Japanese very deliberately picked their route through the northern Pacific to go through places that nobody goes, and it's precisely for that reason.
That's cool.
No, yeah, they were not sighted by a Soviet ship. They were not overheard by the lure line. They had physically removed the telegraph keys from all of the carriers and were observing extremely strict radio silence. Nagumo was the only person in the task force that had the authority to break radio silence, and then only in circumstances whereby the mission itself was being potentially compromised was he allowed to break radio silence. So there you go.
If I remember correctly, too, the lure line was in San Francisco at that time.
Yeah.
I don't think it was out at sea at that time. I could be wrong.
There was a dude named Phil Jacobson, who was an NSA analyst, who wrote a series of articles that you can still find on the NSA's website, and you'll see them in my bibliography as well, that just put paid to all of these various conspiracy theories around radio chatter. And yeah, good stuff. Anyway, next.
Great answer, John.
Aim to please.
How well were prisoners of war treated in the United States, and what did neutral observers' reports say? All access prisoners treated the same? Robert would like to know.
Great question.
So, Camp Shelby actually housed a lot of German and Italian, but mostly German prisoners of war. Hell, 5,000 yards from my museum out in the woods, there's still remnants of the POW camp that you can go see if you're not afraid of copperhead snakes. You can go out there, and dude, they're bad. But either way, they're there. I mean, the remnants are there of the POW camp. The POWs, by and large, in the United States, of which the Japanese POWs were few and far between, and I don't even think they brought any of them here to the Continental 48. But I could be wrong.
I think they did.
Did they?
I think they did. Anyway,
the Krauts and the Italians were incredibly well treated to the point where most of those guys worked on farms or in the agricultural industry, literally, and like plowing fields and everything else just to put them to work to do things. As a matter of fact, Paul B. Johnson State Park, just outside Camp Shelby, the lake was dug by German prisoners of war. The trees that were out there that you can see when the water's low, still see the stumps that were cut down by German POWs. So these guys were worked. It was not slave labor. They got up every morning, at dark 30, went and worked for a few hours and came home. They were fed. They were incredibly well treated, so much so that at the end of the war, a great many of them wanted to stay.
Yes.
They were probably keenly aware that they didn't have much to go home to. But they were also so well treated in the United States that we're like, well, hell, I'm going to stay here. And and a lot of them did, and a lot of them stayed in and around the Mississippi area around Camp Shelby. There was a POW camp just outside of New Orleans, German POW camp. So I mean, yeah, those guys were incredibly well treated. You had your hard cases who tried to escape and were, as I call them, true believers. But by and large, they were well treated, and the population. The American population was like, yeah, these guys are okay, because
we had a guy. Yeah, we had a guy up at our World War II history roundtable for years and years. He was a German POW who, came back over here to study agriculture and married an American girl and stayed. So that happened all the time. I mean, from an actuarial standpoint, you'd actually want to go and look at what was the rate of death within that POW population. For the Germans, and actually, if you go over to Germany, for instance, and you look at the Luftstallagers and those places, the typical attrition rate for Western Allied POWs, that's the key, was around 2.3 to 3% or something like that. If you're a Russian,
on the high end,
yeah, 4 on the high end. If you're a Russian POW, it's far, 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 far worse. Westerners in Japanese captivity, the mortality rate was around 30% or something like that, or high 20s. It was really, really bad.
It was in the 30s. I want to say 36%, but I could be wrong on that off the
Yeah.
top of my head. Yeah.
Call it a third, just round numbers. It's going to be right around there. I don't know what the matching number would be for Axis POWs in American care. I would be willing to bet it is under 2%. Probably under 1% would be my guess.
Yeah, I don't know that number off the top of my head either. But I mean, and when those guys were, I think there were a couple times where some of them were executed
Yep.
in the United States because of nefarious occurrences. It's not, we
Yeah.
didn't just haul them up and shoot them up against the wall like the Japanese did us or the Germans did the Soviets. No, 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 no. Like they did something bad, and there was a reason that they were tried in a court and they were, put to death. But that even then, that number is very, very low. When specifically, I'm relating this to Shelby because I see it every day. When these guys did expire either to illness or whatever, they were given full military burial, full military funerals, the whole nine, even burying them under the flag of the Third Reich in the state of Mississippi. I mean, that was a thing that absolutely did happen. There's photographs of that. So they were very well treated. Very well.
Were there all the Japanese internment camps in California?
No, well, the difference.
Yeah,
Japanese internment camps. We're talking about Japanese Americans, and they were all over the damn place. There were some of them in California. There were some of them, hell, there were some of them outside of Chicago. There were
really?
Some of them in Arkansas. Yeah, I mean, they were all over the damn place. That's a dark period in American history, I'll be honest.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Well, that's cool. Camp Landing here in Florida had a bunch of German prisoners too. I've been to the same kind of thing. When you were talking about that, I've been there. So interesting. I wonder if the Japanese prisoners were treated like. I bet you their percentages of deaths were a little bit higher than the Germans.
I don't know about that.
I don't think so.
Yeah, you had guys like Sakamaki. He was pretty content in captivity from all that I gather. I mean, obviously feeling fairly remorseful, but yeah. And I'm sorry, I'm like looking through my manuscript because I feel like I had these numbers someplace in there in the footnotes and I can't find it. So real-time history has failed. Anyway, let's roll.
Okay, I'd love to know if anybody escaped and never was heard or seen from again.
Oh, I'm sure some dudes did.
Yeah, there was a guy. Not to get too far into the weeds, there was a guy, a German prisoner of war in the United States. His name was Till Kiwe, Kiwe. Yeah, that's how you spell his last name. Anyway, he was a Knight's Cross recipient, and he escaped no less than two times and was recaptured every time. In the movie The Great Escape, and this is honest to God truth, in the movie The Great Escape with Steve McQueen and everybody else, James, the whole James Coburn, the whole guy, the chief German ferret, the guy who wears the black coveralls, that is Till Kiwe. He was a former German prisoner of war, Knight's Cross recipient, who escaped no less than two, maybe three times here in the United States and was recaptured every time. Swear to God. Swear to God.
That's
he would know how to get out.
He would know.
Right. He would know. Right. Okay.
All right. Hey, Seth and John, if the IGN force had been spotted on December 2nd, how would the U.S. forces have been deployed on the 7th?
On the 2nd? That's one where I throw in the towel and say, "I'm sorry, man. I haven't got a crystal ball that big."
I have no idea.
How about this? Try this one on for size. Let's say on the 2nd, the Japanese know they're spotted. What's the contingency plan for that?
God, I used to know this too. On the 2nd,
early. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think they turn around and go home? On the 2nd? I'd say if they're discovered on the 6th, they fight their way in.
Yeah, and that was the contingency plan. That once they got close enough to Hawaii, they were basically fight your way in. On the 2nd, I don't know. I think this is a complete guess. My guess is they turn around and go home, so as not to
risk the ships
and risk a premature declaration of war before the amphibious forces that are going to be in motion to other places like Malaya are actually underway.
Right.
That'd be my guess.
There has to be like a day and time that they're like, from this point on, you push through. From this point before you turn around, right?
No, they definitely did have orders to fight their way in, but I don't know when that order was to go into effect. So, yeah, last 24 hours, I think absolutely. But beyond that, I couldn't tell you.
Okay. This is from BG, B. Graham. He said it was nice to meet John Parshall in person. Hope to meet Seth and Bill someday as well. I don't know if you know who B. Graham is. Do you think the Japanese pushing a carrier engagement in the first half of 1943, when Allied carrier strength was down to the USS Saratoga and Victorious, could have altered the trajectory of the Solomons campaign or Pacific War at large if the Japanese had won by destroying or knocking out both of those carriers?
Great question.
And what was the time period again? Early 43?
43.
Engagement, first half of 43.
I mean, at that point, Guadalcanal's already wrapped up. I mean, the Japanese have already made the decision right around Christmas time in 42. We just can't do this anymore. And, plans are already well in hand at that point to pull their garrison out. So I don't think it affects the trajectory of that campaign at all, because that campaign has essentially been decided by Willis Lee on the night of the 14th, 15th. That's where I come down.
I agree with that. I mean, I was trying to think of when the Essex comes into theater, and that's like late summer 43. So I was trying to think if that would have.
Yeah, because she's got to work up. I mean, she's commissioned in December of 42, but it takes a while to work her up. So
Essex and Bunker Hill, and they don't come in till the end.
Okay.
43.
Hello, love the show. Had Lieutenant Commander John Waldron somehow survived the Battle of Midway, Hornet Air Group Flight to Nowhere, do you think he would have been court-martialed for his actions, insubordination, breaking formations, mutiny? Vinny from Connecticut would like to know.
These are great questions today, I just got to say. Yeah, I mean, arguably, yes. I clearly there are extenuating circumstances in that, he's going to be able to say on the stand, yeah, I kind of flipped Stanhope the bird, but I was the only guy that found a carrier that day. So what you going to do? I don't know. I don't know. Seth, what do you think?
I don't think he does.
Yeah, because I think at the end of the day, Nimitz didn't want to air that dirty laundry. I just think he's going to squash that. He's just going to be like, just shut up. Everybody shut up. Just salute and go about your business,
I don't think they're going to tie him to the mast for that. I think he might not see much more frontline action after that, but they're not going to throw him in the hoosegow.
But
yeah.
Okay.
I mean, just look what happens with Mitcher. Yeah.
Exactly.
Did the Keto Batai Air Group conduct extensive trainings in the Kuril in a place that kind of looked like Pearl Harbor, or did they get standard map photo model briefing after they departed? This is from Seth N.
They were actually exercising down around Kagoshima because Kagoshima had some of the same characteristics as Pearl Harbor. In fact, you'll see references to that in Tora, I believe.
Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, they were doing training down in the south of Japan.
Okay.
But they also got the map exercises and that whole thing too.
Okay. Let's see. Gentlemen, I discovered your podcast through the Masters of Air series and have been an avid viewer ever since. Thank you for introducing me to the absolutely fascinating person that is Admiral Willis Lee, and he is the subject of my question. His last assignment was to develop new tactics to counter the kamikaze's threat. Are there any records or accounts of what he was planning? Thank you for all you do to produce this amazing podcast. I look forward to it every week. Thomas R.
And both Seth and I.
Yeah, I don't think so. For the main reason is that he gets back to the U.S. and it's not long, and I mean like a few days or a couple of weeks, and he dies. So he doesn't even get the opportunity to. I mean, he may have scribbled some stuff down on paper. I don't know, but I mean, he doesn't get the opportunity to actually do what he was assigned to do.
Yeah,
because he passes away.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
if there were anything on that, it would be in Battleship Commander, his biography. I would expect.
Still will.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. This is from Jim McC. Jim McC says, Shawn, I'll try to keep this short, though the framing my question may take more than a simple one-liner. No crap, Jim McC. Here we go. My apologies. It's a good question, Jim, so I'm cutting you some leverage, cut you some slack. In Shattered Sword, John and Anthony take considerable pains to talk about doctrine and learning lessons. Specifically, they speak about the challenges of the IGN had in learning lessons, though the creation of the Keto Batai does somewhat go counter to this point. My question is, what regard to how the U.S. military learned lessons? Specifically, how did we go from figuring out an idea of a lesson to be learned, moving it up to the chain such that it can be matured to the point where it is a lesson that is appropriate to be converted into doctrine? Further, to then ensure that the industrial support necessary to fulfill the new component of doctrine can be implemented. Was it different from Army and Navy? Was there a single process or a collection of processes? From my perspective, there is perhaps the more critical aspect of taking us from where we were at the beginning of the war to the fleet we had in 44 to the manner in which we concluded the war. Arguably, these were radically different militaries. An important side note to me, I only found out about the podcast 6 months ago. It has replaced all other listening for me other than taking time to listen to Shattered Sword.
Oh, man. Okay, that was a dizzying question.
Yeah, that's a lot to digest.
I
was going to say, insofar as the U.S. learning from what there were in terms of what they learned, let's say off the shores of Guadalcanal, there were a few people who learned it and then they didn't really process it fast enough, in my opinion. If you look at some of the naval battles in the Solomons in 43, there's a lot of things that happened there in terms of the United States doing this kind of the same damn thing that they did in Guadalcanal and us losing ships and cruisers having their bows blown off because admirals just didn't absorb the information that was processed. And then at the same time, you have guys like Arleigh Burke, Fred Moosebrugger, who look at what happens in the Solomons and goes, yeah, well, this is stupid. We're going to do this. And then they do that, and that becomes the doctrine because of the successes that they have at Cape St. George and Empress Augusta Bay and blah, 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 blah. So it was a slow matriculation of learning in terms of the United States Navy, with the exception of a handful of people. That's my take on it.
And the book you want to get is Trent Hone's Learning War. You would be absolutely fascinated by that book because that's exactly what Trent is talking about. How do we get up the learning curve? And Trent's basic argument is that the pre-war U.S. Navy culture was of a culture that was very open to learning and learning from multiple different avenues, and did not penalize making mistakes in maneuvers too seriously. As long as there was learning that came out of that, everybody's basically good to go. He is a technologist by training. He's very interested in militaries as complex adaptive systems, which is something that, grooves with me because I'm a technologist by training too. So you would be fascinated by that book, and I strongly urge you to pick it up. One facet of the question, though, was there feedback from the Navy into the development of technology? That, I think, is more limited. Really, it's more of, hey, there's this new gizmo that has just come out. How do we adapt that?
How we use it.
Yeah. And again, Seth, when you and I were out at the WHNA conference last year, or earlier this year. And Leonard Hines gave that talk on the impact on SG radar and how, a lot of skippers picked up on the fact that, okay, this is a really cool piece of kit, but it took a while to take that sensor, integrate it into the Combat Information Center, and there was no one cookie cutter design for what a CIC was supposed to look like at this point in time. I mean, Nimitz basically promulgated an order. Everybody should have a CIC, and kind of left it to the skippers to like organize your ship the way you want it to be. And eventually there will be more sort of standardized approaches to this, but it's really kind of a bubble up kind of model where you got a lot of people experimenting with different things, and cats like Moosebrugger and whoever are like, oh yeah, that works. Okay, I'm doing that. So anyway,
To that end, and insofar as SG Sugar George is concerned, you look at a lot of the well, you look at freaking every one of the post Friday the 13th AARs that were written by the skippers of the senior surviving officers of whatever ship it is in the United States Navy. And all of them say, every friggin' one says, this is some really good stuff. It needs to be on every damn ship in the Navy
right.
because it allowed us, or Helena to do this, or Portland to do this, or Fletcher to do this, or whatever the case may be, or
Yeah.
see this or see that. And
One
that
of the
is
big
good.
I was just going to say one of the big innovations there is you've got the PPI indicator, which is, the sort of the classic radar display that we sort of take as being synonymous with radar. We got this 360-degree sweep
Yeah, the little
thing happening,
sweeper
and
thingy.
yeah, we're at the center of the circle. That wasn't the case before SG. Earlier model radars, you've got an oscilloscope that's giving you a blip at 273 degrees. What the hell does that mean? I don't know what the range of that blip is. Blah blah blah. The PPI was a really big step forward. So anyway,
And that's when a lot of that the SG was coming into play more and more on most of the ships that were coming into the fleet in late 1942. That's why you see, some of the bigger ships and the newer ships, they have all
yeah,
that jazz. And that's why when I said like guys like Moosebrugger, Arleigh Burke, they're reading these after action reports, they're reading these action reports, and they're saying, okay, this is how, okay, so he said this, and Jesse Coward saw this and he says this, and that's why they execute what they do when they do it in the Solomons in 43 because they know
yeah,
how to do it because they absorbed that information that was given to them and other guys did not,
yeah.
so anyway.
Anyway, go get Trent Hone's Learning War. You will not be disappointed. It's a great book. You'll really like it.
The only thing I'll say is on the modern battlefield, there's actually teams that, I'm speaking from the Army perspective, that go out and they, Seth touched on AARs. This is
Mm.
called an after action review. And this is basically where everybody writes down what you just saw. There's a meeting. Everybody's giving out their ideas, what they, their perspectives, and that's boxed up. And usually these Army teams will go out to battlefields and they'll interview people. They'll go look at the ground and they
Yeah,
are looking for these lessons learned. Our military does an excellent job of, and I can only speak a little bit to the military sense now. And when I say now, when I was in, but I do feel that has kind of translated itself from World War II, that there are teams looking at this, trying to decipher where can we get an edge? What are we missing? What can we add to this? And I think that's one of the most brilliant things our military, for the past 100 years has been able to do is looking for that next evolution. And
right.
nothing shows that better than the Pacific Fleet from 42 to 44. I mean,
Yeah,
that is an astronomical jump, technological jump. And a lot of that comes from lessons learned, right, guys?
Sure.
yeah, absolutely.
All right,
The other people,
go ahead,
yeah,
John.
I was just going to say the other people that do that really, really well that don't get the props for it is the Red Army in World War II. And that's one of the things I talk about in my book is just they were incredibly pragmatic about learning those battle lessons. And we don't necessarily associate that with, the Red Army in World War II. We look at them as this sort of wooden, unresponsive, kind of force. And no, man, it's amazing what getting your butts kicked will do in terms of your flexibility in adopting different approaches. So anyway,
No, I've read a book where it was a Soviet book from like 42 of how to deal with the Blitzkrieg.
yeah,
And the whole book's designed on, this is how we're going to counter this technological jump,
yeah,
how we're going to counter it. Luckily, they had the lives to spare to learn those lessons and implement them, right, John?
yeah, absolutely. But anyway,
All
yeah,
right, hello there. Big fan. Love all the work you guys have been doing here. Here's my question. In the famous Second Naval Battle of Guadalcanal, with the USS Washington laying the smackdown on the Kirishima. Admiral Kondo and the IJN initially misidentify the American battleships as heavy cruisers.
Super type cruisers, yeah.
Do you think this misidentification was because how different the new American fast battleships looked compared to the pre-war battleships, i.e., 3 turrets of 4, 1 main superstructure instead of 2, tripod, cast mouse, etc.? Thanks. Keep up the great work, Grant.
I'm going to say no on that for 2 reasons: North Carolina and South Dakota. They'd already seen these ships, and they had identified later, as this is what this was.
So it's not a lessons learned for the Japanese.
No, I think it's just poor identification.
Yeah, and I think some of that is willful on the part of Kondo we had never risked battleships in Iron Bottom to this point in the conflict. And I think he's just kind of got blinders on at that, that it could be our heavy combatants actually coming down and tangling with them in those waters. I just think he just couldn't get his head around that. At least that's part of it.
I don't know if they knew that Washington was in theater at that time. I know they knew that South Dakota was, because they positively identified her after the fact that they didn't say South Dakota, but a South Dakota class battleship.
And Eastern Saws.
Or Santa Cruz.
Santa Cruz.
But Eastern Saws was North Carolina. But regardless of this, when they torpedoed North Carolina, when she sucked up that torpedo in Torpedo Junction, they knew it was USS North Carolina. So that was not an misidentified ship or anything else. But insofar as the battleship fight, I just think that was poor aerial identification on the Japanese part, because they said, to be exact, 4 heavy cruisers and 2 destroyers, which were coming down to deal with.
Right. And good point, because there were you're right, 2 misidentifications, one by their aerial scouts, but then at night, the lookouts on their ships are saying these are
super cruisers or whatever.
Super type cruisers, yeah. Although eventually,
baby, they are.
They are super cruisers.
Oh, baby, they are.
Anyway, good question.
Yeah. All right. Hey, cobblers. I'm a high school history teacher from North Queensland, Australia. My question is actually about curriculum. In Australian schools, history is taught to year 10, and most students get shamefully inadequate dosage of the Pacific War and of history of that, and is really limited to Pearl Harbor and the British leaving our boys at Singapore to starve, building railway lines in Burma, and militiamen throwing the Japanese back across the Kokoda Track. The lessons in terms of our place in Asia, our relationship with Kepos, is drowned in the cliche, ignorant ramblings of Gallipoli. Is the teaching of the Pacific War in schools around the world taught very poorly, like it is in our nation? The fact an Australian student is more likely to show Sadaka Saka, with all respects to her tragic stories, is then Douglas MacArthur or Chester Nimitz, USS, is shameful. Is this because it's so problematic? War crimes, perceived threats to teachers often being labeled as racist if they say the Japanese were truly terrible enemy of war. Like the Nazis don't present the problem. You can say they are evil and feel safe. Thank you for equipping me with a better fight of a little war against ignorance. Steak and eggs soon, Scott C.
Thanks, Scott.
I like that, steak and eggs.
Yeah.
Having a son in high school at the present time, I can assure you that the knowledge of the Pacific War in the United States being taught, rather, is no better than it is in Australia. Not at all. They learn about Pearl Harbor, D-Day, Japanese American incarceration, the Tuskegee Airmen, and the bomb, and that is it. That is it. Honest to God, I've seen the damn books. So, yeah, it's shameful. It really is.
Some of that, I don't like it, but I also kind of shrug my shoulders at it too, in that, we have to also accept the fact that this is now 80 years in the rearview mirror. Obviously, World War II is, in my opinion, the most important event of the 20th century, hands down. But we now have a fair amount of history to cover, in the course of this country. I do think that we tend to get hung up on stuff earlier in the narrative arc, I remember when I was a kid just memorizing way too much about the Louisiana Purchase and stuff like that, various treaties that have been signed with Indians and whatnot. I don't know. I didn't even want to go down the rabbit hole of fighting over what history gets taught, because I know that that leads to all sorts of contentious issues. But
I
yeah,
agree with you
it's
insofar as that there's a limited amount of time,
bingo.
in a school year to teach
Yeah,
whatever. And to your point exactly, there's a hell of a lot of history to be
cover.
taught, or to cover, yeah, is a better way to put it. But I mean, the Treaty of Ghent does not make any impression on a 16-year-old in 2025. It doesn't.
Yeah,
It
does
doesn't.
not.
So,
Whereas, the impact of the Second World War is still with us today. I
yeah,
mean, yeah,
exactly.
that's one of the points that, Rich Frank is trying to make in the third volume of his trilogy, that, we're still living with the impacts of the collapse of the Japanese in the Asia Pacific region, and, the collapse of the colonial model there as well, has huge impacts on the diplomatic states that we're still encountering in that sphere of the planet yet today. So anyway, contention. Yeah. Bottom line is, yeah, we're with you, brother.
Yeah.
It's the same here. So yeah, Merry
Yeah.
Christmas.
As a former instructor, I'll tell you, it's up to you to be able to hit the high points, even though you have a limited amount of time. I mean, there's a way, you could teach anybody something in 1 hour.
Right.
You've got to be able to hit those high things. So that becomes your challenge. And that's growing up, Seth and I went to the same high school. I mean, we're only hitting the high points. It's, when you go to college is when you start learning more, you start nailing
Sure.
down what
In depth. Yeah.
your discipline is. But I'm
Right.
still an advocate. If you sit me down for 60 minutes with some kids, they're going to know what the high points of the Pacific were. They're not going to know what the Washington's guns were, but
Right.
they'll be able to identify. Robert Henlon speaks glowingly of Admiral King's leadership on pre-war, where Henlon was a JO. No mention of the terrible temper, more of a mentor relationship. Was King a good man to work for and not with? Z.
I think
Right.
it depends on who you ask.
Yeah. Uh, yeah. Depends on whether you were competent or not.
Yeah.
To me, the overriding feature of King's personality is just his overwhelming intellect. I mean, he was incredibly competent. He was very, very smart. He wanted clear lines of delineation around responsibility and who's going to do what. And he just did not suffer fools gladly at all.
Boom.
Yeah. And so if you demonstrate to him that you're competent, I think he's basically good to go. He's still kind of he's not going to be
He's an
warm.
irascible guy.
He's an irascible, not warm and fuzzy guy, but he's going to
No.
let you do what you want to do. But if, like, one of the things I argue in 42, the relationship with Dudley Pound, who's First Sea Lord, it's not because King is anti-British. He doesn't respect Dudley Pound's intellect. That by the time they get to this point in their relationship, King has made a number of suggestions to Pound on how the convoying should be done to be more efficient fuel wise and command arrangement wise. And Dudley is just like, well, I'm not going to go for that because, among other things, it might mean that there could be occasions when Royal Navy ships are under American command. And at that point, King is like, you're dead to me. You're dead to me. I'm just not going to deal with you anymore. And he's, as Seth says, he's an incredibly irascible human being. And once you're dead to him, there's no coming back. I mean, it's over at that point. So,
He had a good relationship with Chester Nimitz and Raven Spruance,
yep.
and
It
and
took a while
and
to get there.
it did, and Bill Halsey too, for that matter, and people like Jocko Clark. He had a good relationship with those guys, and they thought he was a I don't want to say a nice guy, but a good guy.
Yeah.
And there's several stories about him when he was specifically as captain of the USS Lexington CV2,
Mm-hmm.
and some of his JOs, and I can't remember it. It wasn't his executive officer. It doesn't matter. guy, he was OOD at this one time, and he makes a course change without letting King know because King's sacked out. He's sleeping, and then King happens to walk up on the bridge and blows a gasket. How dare you do this? And well, the JO stood up to him and was like, well, damn it, I'm OOD. That's my job is to do this. And King just chewed his ass. And then later called him into his quarters and was like, hey, look, I'm sorry. You did the right thing. I was a tool. I'm sorry. And I mean, this is a true story. And again, I'm obviously paraphrasing, but he was a pretty good guy, overall. He was a hard drinker. There's rumors of him being a womanizer and things like that. And I don't know if that's true or not. I have no
Well,
idea.
Dave
But
Conan actually, disputes a lot of that in his
yeah,
recent.
I mean, he was a drinker. There's no question there.
Yeah, no question about that. So,
But I mean, like insofar as his relationship, from with the press in particular, with the United States Navy in early 42. They thought that King was just this villainous, you know, had, blood dripping from fangs and long claws because he was just this mean old man who didn't want to sell
mhm,
anybody anything, which was quite accurate, frankly.
true.
But
Yeah,
then he has a meeting with some of these press agents in I don't know, 43, early 43. Literally, it's at the house of a friend of theirs, mutual friend. They're drinking beer. And then they wind up doing this every week or every
right,
month, I think, for the remainder of the war. And they all love him.
right.
All these journalists think, of all people, think Ernie King is the greatest thing to walk the earth. And because he was truthful, he was relaxed, and he was genuinely a pretty good dude. And he
Yeah,
did stand up for his people, which you gotta
yeah,
respect that. I'm sorry.
yeah. There you go. Long-winded answer, which
Sorry.
we're good at.
Steve 24601 has a question. Um, First, a quickie. I keep hearing about Carrier Division 1, Carrier Division 2, and Carrier Division 5. What about Carrier Division 3 and 4? Did they do anything worth mentioning?
Those were the light carriers in the Japanese inventory. So you had ships like Hosho and Ryujo and those scows. So no, that they I, that's mean of me. You don't hear as much about them because they're just not as important, frankly.
What was the Aleutian campaign? Was that Carrier Division what?
That's Cardiff 4. That's
Okay.
4.
Hi, Seth and John. I'm emailing you from West Porters Lake, Nova Scotia, where my kids and I like to listen to your podcast as we are commuting to school and work.
Huh.
My question
Nova
for your
Scotia.
Q&A is this. In 1944 and 45, Admiral King was very reluctant to include the British Pacific Fleet in U.S. operations for various reasons, including logistics of keeping the BPF in supply. However, in 42 and 43, Australian and New Zealand forces were actively working with the U.S. forces. How did Admiral King and the U.S. forces view the participation of Australia and New Zealand at 42-43? And did the U.S. view of these partners change over the war? Also, why were there no Australians or New Zealand divisions in the Philippines or Okinawan operations?
So much to unpack there. Um, we're a lot more desperate in 1942, and we're certainly
Yeah.
happy to have a few more cruisers in the mix, which the Australians had. By the time you get to 44, 45, the logistics to keep 2 or 3 Australian cruisers in supply is a whole hell of a lot different than keeping an entire British carrier task force in supply. That's a stretch because the British can't do it themselves, you know.
And they
Um,
couldn't operate at and as far as the BPF is concerned, they couldn't operate at the tempo that the Big Blue Fleet could, nor did they want to, because I can't remember his name. Once they get out there, he goes to Chester Nimitz, British Admiral. Is it Fraser?
Come on, John. Is it Cunningham? No.
No, it's not Cunningham. Hey,
God,
regardless, he goes
fail
to
on our
Nimitz,
part.
and Nimitz says, "Hey, how long do you think you can operate? With your carrier task force, da 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 da." And he gives him something, ludicrous like, "Oh, 18 days." And Nimitz is like, "Ha! No, that is most certainly not how this ship sails."
Yeah.
And it's literally, and it's all based on logistics. And insofar as the Australians and the New Zealand, the Kiwis in 42, and we needed all the help we can get, just like you're saying. And if I remember correctly, Admiral King absolutely loved the Aussies, because of their contributions to the Pacific War in 1942 and then beyond. But yeah, as far as BPF is concerned, they just couldn't ride herd with the Big Blue Fleet. There was ammunition thing. It was a whole different logistical train to keep those guys in supply, and that's why you see them sail with the Big Blue Fleet, but Halsey, insofar as like operations off mainland Japan, kind of lets them do their own thing.
Right.
So,
Yeah. A lot of the British combatants were not as long-legged as American ships were. We just, among other things, we had better propulsion plants, and that they were higher pressure, higher temperature steam plants, and so they were more efficient than both the Japanese and the British plants, frankly. So we could just project power a lot further away. Um, what was the other? Oh, combat divisions in the Philippines. I feel like a lot of that, frankly, is just Mac doing them dirty, and not wanting to have the Australians in on any share of, the glory of liberating the Philippines. I think that he just saw that as a purely military or an American show. And so you see the Australian divisions are still fighting in places down in Indonesia, Ambon and Celebes and places like
yeah.
that, which nobody in America cares about now, which is unkind because, yeah, the Australians had fabulous troops and they were incredibly important allies for us. And I wish that Mac had not been such a big headed tool and basically kind of shuffled them to the side when it was convenient to do so. It's shoddy on his part. And frankly, he was shoddy from the get go. The fact that he wouldn't put any Australian officers on his command staff, that's just ridiculous. So,
And then too, when you go to the Philippines in 44, I mean, I hate to say this, but we didn't need them in the Philippine operation because MacArthur, John McManus says this all the time. I had the largest field command
right.
outside of Eisenhower. I mean, we had more
Yeah.
people than we knew
1.7
what to.
million Army troops, right?
Yeah, we had more people than we knew what to do with for the Philippines operation. Same thing with Okinawa. Is that, I mean, you're not going to throw them a mulligan just to do it, just as an attaboy. Hey, thanks for supporting us in 42. Here,
Right.
you have a piece of this pie in 45. That's not how that works when
Yeah.
you have enough guys to do it on your own. Does that make any sense? I mean,
Yeah,
Well, I think
absolutely.
it's personal too because of Pearl Harbor. It's more like, do you feel like that has something to do with it? Like, hey, this is ours. We got this. You
I
help.
think that's part of it. I do.
You know,
For certain commanding officers, i.e., William Halsey, I think that was certainly part of it. He wanted the lion's share of killing the Japanese Navy in 1945 because he said that. He
Yeah.
yeah.
even said as much.
I will say too, just from a logistical standpoint too, trying to keep an Australian division or two in supply, that's just one more headache. Oh, God bless it. Now we have to ship in Lee Enfield
303. Yeah.
rounds and 25-pounder artillery. It's just like it's just simpler.
Yeah.
Particularly if these logistics are being staged and pushed weeks ahead of when we anticipate that they're going to be needed. Those ships have got to be in motion like 6 months, 6 weeks ahead of when they're going to, be offloaded there because it takes that long to move across the ocean. So anyway, a lot of different answers there. It's kind of what it comes down to. I
Here we
wanted to actually, I'm going to give you a little ex post facto real time history here because I did go and look up some stuff on prisoners of war
Hmm.
mortality rates that I have in my manuscript. So the average mortality rate for British aviators in German captivity is 3.2%.
Okay.
The average mortality rate for Western POWs in Japanese captivity is 27%, which is more than 7 times that of Western prisoners held by the Germans. However, approximately 45% of German prisoners held by the Soviets perished, and 60% of Soviet POWs held by the Germans perished. So Yeah, there you go. Yeah, the Eastern Front was not a good place to be. And those
Yeah.
numbers are skewed to particularly early war Soviet POWs held by the Germans. Just basically all of those guys died, like millions of them. So, anyway, there you
All
go.
right. Always learning.
Always learning.
Hey there, my name is Colin from Ontario, Canada. Here's my question. How different is one jungle from another across the Pacific? There's been a lot of talk about the varying thickness of jungles on these islands. What does that mean? Do they all carry the same perils? Thanks. Love the show, Colin.
Yeah, I say that in
And
my book.
not every island in the Pacific is jungle either, by the way.
Also
So
true. Yeah, you look at a place like Iwo Jima and there's no jungle there. It'd be a lot
yeah.
nicer if it were. Um, right? Um, so you look at a place like Malaya, and what the British would call jungle in many cases is actually cultivation. You've got, rubber plantations that are fairly orderly stands of trees that will have, fairly heavy undergrowth in some cases, but then, it'll take you a while to get off of the plantations and actually back into the jungle, in which case there's relatively heavy undergrowth. But even in a place like Malaya, when you're looking at something that is true jungle, there were roads there. And in some cases, paved roads. And in many cases, too, there would be paths and unpaved roads and indigenous trails, in some cases, railroad embankments and cuttings and that kind of stuff. So there were often ways that you could make your way around enemy positions or outflank them using transportation conduits. You then end up in a place like Guadalcanal or New Guinea. You got none of that, like none. There was one sort of truck road on the northern coast of Guadalcanal in the copra plantation area. But beyond that, you're talking native trails. That's the only, way of getting around through the jungle. Same thing in New Guinea. There has never been a road built across the Owen Stanley Mountains. There was a Jeep track that was hacked out during like 1943 by the Australians. And as soon as it was abandoned after the war, it just disappeared again. The jungle just took it back over. So that's what we mean when we say there's jungle and then there's jungle. So yeah, that's kind of right.
Same thing. You could say different islands in the Philippines too. Or same thing. Luzon is a little more,
Cultivated
yeah, than
culture.
parts of Leyte. Some parts of Leyte are, darker than hell, and you can't see nothing because the jungle's so thick.
Yep.
And then you go to other islands, Mindanao. There's portions of Mindanao that were cleared and portions of Mindanao that weren't. And then the jungle, it's like anywhere else. I mean, you look at Tarawa. There's no damn jungle in Tarawa, and yet it's
Yeah.
in the middle of the Pacific.
Yeah.
Tinian, there's portions of Tinian that have, as you know, no jungle at all. And then there's
Right.
other portions that are relatively thick. So,
Yeah.
I mean, when I think of jungle, I think of Guadalcanal, I think of Bougainville, Cape Gloucester, New Britain. That's jungle, baby.
Yeah. Yeah. Very dense vegetation. You can even
Wet.
see portions of this on places like Saipan too, where if you get
Mhm.
off the beaten track just a matter of feet, all of a sudden your visibility is limited to 3 or 4 feet because the vegetation is so dense in front of you, you can't see a damn thing. It's certainly that way on Guadalcanal. Like it's very thick, very fast if you go off the beaten tracks. So
But they
yeah.
all carry unique diseases.
Well, again, there's less of
Well,
that in the Central Pacific. You don't really have to worry about things like dengue fever and whatnot in a place like Iwo Jima or even in Saipan or Guadalcanal, excuse me, Saipan or Guam. But yeah, you get down south in places like, yeah, New Guinea and New Britain and places like that. It's just evil. Yeah.
pestilential swamps.
Yeah. Malaria is very widespread throughout the region. Intriguingly, in places like New Guinea, once you got above a certain elevation into the Owen Stanley Mountains, like up around the gap that's up there, you get up above 4 or 5 thousand feet. The mosquitoes tend to thin out; they just don't live up that high. Uh, so then you've got more problems with trench foot and dysentery and that kind of crap. I think, yeah, but you don't have to worry about dengue or malaria there. So no mosquitoes.
All right. Hi, guys. My question. If we had not used the atomic bomb and had to invade the mainland of Japan, how would the Russians have assisted the invasion? Did the Russians have a navy in the Pacific? How were they going to get to the island of Japan? Or are they just landlocked like the Japanese troops in Manchuria? I love the podcast, and I'll be watching while enjoying a Sinpack special from Bill from Milwaukee, meaning the good land.
The good lands.
Okay.
We had actually given the Soviets some of their amphibious kit. They had the ability. I mean, they got into the Kuriles. They were going to invade Hokkaido as well.
But they're not moving armies, John. They're moving divisions, right?
They're moving a division or something like that. Yeah, it's nowhere near as sophisticated as the kind of stuff that we could do. They didn't have any sort of, formal gunfire support doctrine or something like that.
Yeah.
Then again, I mean, the Soviets had done some pretty crazy amphibious operations during the war down in the Black Sea. They went into, at the end of 1941, they put a multi-divisional force into the Kerch Peninsula in the Crimea in the middle of a Force 8 gale in the winter. Think about that. It just kind of verged on insanity, but they weren't particularly concerned about casualties. And so, from a technique standpoint, were they very good? No. Did that necessarily matter? No. I mean, they could still have plopped a division or two into a place like Hokkaido if we hadn't brushed them back and said, no, you don't need to do that.
Yeah. There's and we've touched on it, and Seth's got one. It relates back to the British involvement in the invasion of Japan and Russia. It's called Hell to Pay. It's an amazing book on the invasion. And
John Greco.
Yep, all the aspects that we've kind of covered in the past 2 hours. I would highly encourage people to read it because he does an extensive perspective, like
down in the weeds. Yeah.
Down in the weeds. Hi, guys. This question's for Seth. Seth, have you ever considered writing a book? I'm sure you've come across plenty of untold, overlooked stories during the course of your research. Thanks, Scott from Washington State. Seth, what listeners want to know? We touched on this last episode.
We did.
Why don't you hit on it again?
Yeah,
doing,
I am.
Seth?
We're doing that. I don't know. What did I tell you, Shawn? 65% ish.
65
ish. Done. Naval Battle of Guadalcanal, Friday the 13th, and all the intricacies that go before that, and then during that event, and after that event, and then of course the battleships, because why not? Because that's just cool. Get to talk about Willis Lee and lots of boom boom in the words of the great John Parshall. So no, that's coming. Due date for that manuscript is June 1st, 2026. The clock is a ticking. St. Martin's Macmillan is going to be the publisher of this. Theoretically, it's going to come out in the fall of 2027. That's their timeline, not mine. Whatever.
So are you going to be able to come up with something resembling a credible track chart of that engagement, do you think?
Hell no. I'm not even going to try. Okay. And so here's the thing.
Thereby putting me to shame, because I've said in my book, I'm like, I don't think it's ever going to be done. But then Robert Lundgren,
don't you have somebody
to do this. Yeah, isn't Lundgren trying to do that?
Lundgren kind of sort of did that, and good on him. How accurate is it? Christ knows, because, and I'm not downplaying anything he's done. I'm just saying that, again, having read all these action reports, till I'm blue in the face, it's like these guys were not taking accurate readings when they're getting shot at from 360 freaking degrees. So their recollections are, and which were done in most cases, like either the day after, a couple days after, depending on how badly damaged the ships were. Some of them even several days after. It's what they think they did. They don't know. So if those track charts are being based off of that, well, good luck with that, brother, because
they conflict. in a lot
Yeah,
of cases.
and then even then, it's like, oh well, Cushing was over here, but was it? Was that Cushing, or was that, you don't know. The
Right.
thing is especially with the Friday the 13th event, the battleship, with Willis Lee, that's a little more fight, that's a little more
Yeah.
concrete. But the Friday the 13th battle is just such a kerfluffle. It is such a furball that I'm not even trying to do that. And the whole basis of this book is, we've talked about this, John. I tell history in a different way. You tell it
You're a
from,
first person accounts guy. Yeah.
exactly. And that's what this is. This is,
Hmm.
what did John Parshall see on that night and he's going to tell you in his own words, and I'm going to be the facilitator to get
Right.
that done. Because that's how I've done history my entire career. And let me just say, there's a lot of things that I've found that are in this book, some quotes and some one-liners and different things that are just freaking awesome.
I'm
You couldn't, oh
can't wait.
man.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Have you
it's
gotten
good.
into the Have you gotten into the Japanese sources?
A little bit because, as you are keenly aware, there's not a whole hell of a lot out there.
Yeah.
Chihaya's got some stuff out there that I use some stuff from him. Tamichi or Hara Tamichi, a lot of stuff from him.
Hmm.
I can't think of his first Shinya, drawing a blank. Mitsuharu Shinya was on
Okay.
Akatsuki.
Oh,
He wrote some stuff after the war. He was a prisoner of war in Australia, ironically enough. And he was fished out of the water the day after Friday the 13th.
14th. Yeah.
So he's
13th.
he wrote a book after the war. Used a lot of his stuff, like I said, Chihaya, Hara,
Hmm.
Ugaki, even though Ugaki wasn't there, but he's reading all the stuff that's going on there. But there is some Japanese stuff, but it's obviously heavily focused on the United States because there's a
Sure.
lot more of that material there.
Yeah.
So yeah, so there's some pretty good
Cool.
stuff in there.
Yeah.
Pretty good
Looking
stuff.
forward to it.
It'll be out.
All right, gentlemen, last question.
Woo.
This arrived
Excuse me. Sorry.
at 10:57 September 26th by Thaddeus S, which would have meant it was at 11:57 Boston time where he's from. So
Under the
So
wire.
literally at the closing gate.
he had 3 minutes to spare. So
Out of bed.
someone who does that,
I love it.
I gotta keep him on as the last one. He said, "I would love a narrated walkthrough of the is it Yashikin Museum? How do I say that, John?
Yushikan.
Yushikon.
I visited recently in the description of the participants in the coup attempt on August 14th, 1945, as patriotic rebels had me rolling."
Yeah.
He also states, please post Kitty Butai pictures. His question is there any documentation from the Japanese leadership on how they thought an American occupation would proceed, say on the scale of the rape of Nanking to the Marshall Plan?
Oh, wow. Great question that I don't know the answer to. Yeah. No, it's a great question, though. Yeah. There's got to be some stuff out there that would have views on what they thought was going to happen when the Yanks come ashore. I'm sure they didn't think it was pretty either. Um, I don't know. Yeah, that's a super question. I wish I knew the answer to it.
Seth?
Yeah, I mean, I know the civilian population in Japan were flabbergasted when the Americans came ashore and didn't, just
Yeah,
wholesale slaughter the population.
right.
And quite the opposite. They're giving out candy and, K-rats to the kids. And that's part of the reason that the occupation went so damn well is that we were
Yes,
kind conquerors, and the
by and
Japanese were
large.
like, hmm,
By and large. I mean, of
yeah, yeah.
course,
I mean, there was incidents here and there
yes,
for sure,
there,
but I mean,
yes, there were rapes, there were problems
sure.
here. Yeah, no question of it. But yeah, by and large. I've told this story before. This is out of, I forget the name of the author, but Embracing Defeat. And
Hmm.
he talks about the fact that there's this American truck convoy going through a town. One of our trucks accidentally hits a little girl, and everything screeches to a halt. We get out, we get her into a truck and whiz her off to a hospital, and she's okay. And the locals are like, if that had been a Japanese army truck, they wouldn't have even stopped. They're just dead kid in the road. Okay, well that's how it rolls. But little things like that paid enormous dividends in terms of building goodwill for the occupation. It's like, okay, yeah, we can live with these guys. yes, they're hitting on our girls too, and we don't like that, but blah blah blah. That's
what
by
happened,
and
man.
large, yeah, was a pretty benign occupation.
Young men and young women are going to do what young men and young women do.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
But
there's a sex slave books. There's a book that I read in college about Japanese prostitutes and the occupation and all that jazz.
And that's another thing that this book, Embracing Defeat, kind of talks about too, is that just from a social turmoil standpoint and reinvention, Japanese society immediately post-war was much more flexible and fluid than it had been before the war. And there were possibilities to just, all bets were off at this point. The country's been bombed flat. What am I going to do? I got to do something new. I can't do what I had been doing. You look at a guy like Mitsuo Fuchida, reinvents himself as a Christian missionary, which I think is an enormously good job for a guy like that. He's
That
very,
Tora.
yeah, he's very charismatic. He's good at influencing people, and so that would have been inconceivable for a guy like him before the war. But again, all bets are off. So yeah, you see a lot of that, and yeah, for a lot of young women too, it's like, well, this is how I put food on the table, and
yeah, you got to eat.
you got to eat,
Yeah, you
right?
got to
So,
eat. And I mean,
and from the Japanese standpoint, in a lot of cases, a lot of them are just kind of like, yeah, you got to eat, So
yeah.
yeah, it's just how it is. Anyway,
Times in Tokyo in 1945, post-war, were not exactly, the pastures
mm,
weren't very green, shall we
yeah,
say.
yeah, for sure. Anyway,
Well, gentlemen, I went through the numbers. We have covered over 230 questions in these six
cool.
Q&A podcasts.
Wow.
We brought in two guests, and it has been a marathon, but it has been an honor and a privilege. More so for everybody out there. You guys are an inspiration for us, especially for Seth and John, who help, you guys breathe life into this podcast. Moving forward again, I'm gonna pound, please keep the questions small,
Yes,
short next time. It makes my sanity easier. For somebody that's got to go through 500 questions, I can just easily look at something and make it. I want my plan is every time I read a question, I want to put it in, and if I don't, it's usually it's too long, or there's a lot of questions, or frankly, it's been answered. We've already answered it, so go
yeah,
back and we've answered it probably in another Q&A. So I really appreciate everybody's stories and your thanks, and it means a lot to me personally to do this. Again, Seth and John, we don't get paid for it. It's a labor of love, and we really really appreciate everybody listening, and just we love you all. Thank you so much, and I appreciate John and Seth you allowing me the honor and privilege to come in and help you guys out for a little bit and have a good time and have a couple of beverages.
It's
absolutely.
always good fun. Always
Yeah.
good fun.
No, we really enjoy it too. I think it's just fun to have to think on your feet and take these things cold and just run with them. And this is a particularly good one, I think, in terms of the quality of the questions. So
All of
yeah,
the questions for every episode have been freaking
yeah,
awesome.
it's
They
been
really
really good.
have. You guys really
Yeah,
brought the A game for this round of Q&As, plural.
yeah.
Yeah, there were several
No,
questions where I was like, I don't know.
no. So we're privileged to hang out with y'all. Is kind of what it comes down to. We have a great time with
Agreed.
these things, and thanks for being part of our community and hanging out with us on
The
Tuesdays. We really,
nerderati.
yeah, the nerderati. We really have a great time with you guys.
Erderati.
And Shawn, thank you for all the work that you put in on these. So happy
Absolutely.
holidays, everybody. And here's to 2026. This is coming down the road. And yeah, we will keep the content coming. We got more than we know what to do with. So
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
there's
Oh
plenty
yeah.
of material coming down the pike, so we got a
yep,
lot of stuff to talk about. So, are we good?
I think we're
We're
good.
we're good. See you guys in
Good.
2026.
All right.
Yeah. All right. Well, with that, we want to thank you very much for listening and/or watching to this episode of the Unauthorized History of the Pacific War. Give us a rating and review. We do appreciate it. Do not send us a comment or a question right now because we've had enough of that, but we will ask for them again in the
Yes, we
near
will.
future. But, whatever. I know you want to reach out and say, hey, we're always there. So, once again, my name is Seth Paridon. I want to thank you very much for listening in or watching. Shawn, my brother, as always, thank you for doing this with us. We greatly appreciate it. John, let's get out of here.
I'm John Parshall. Thanks so much for being with us, and we will see you again next week.